Hey folks, what I have for you here today are the results of a Kingdom Hearts World Popularity Survey that I ran not too long ago. Or maybe moderately long ago, depending on how much time this took me to get out. If you missed it, or if you're new, back in October of 2024, I ran a similar survey that asked the audience for their favorite characters. You can check that out here. I had a lot of fun making that one, so it felt only natural to make a follow-up in the same format, but for KH Worlds. Like last time, the survey asked voters to submit their top 5 in no particular order. Unlike last time, to some people's disappointment, I provided drop-down menus instead of letting you type your own answers. Look, I knew we'd get meme votes the first time around. That was the cost I was willing to pay so I could give people the freedom of putting down truly whatever they wanted. Unlike characters, I think it's a bit less arguable what counts as a world in the Kingdom Hearts series, although we'll get into some caveats. Regardless, there are few enough that a drop-down listing all of them is manageable to navigate. To be specific, I put together a list of 119 worlds. Of course, there aren't that many uniquely named worlds in the series, but I allowed you to vote for specific iterations of worlds. Olympus Coliseum shows up so many times, I wanted to give you the chance to vote for any of its forms. Like with the character survey, I purposely gave the voters no direction as to how they determine their favorite worlds. It could be for physical design, visuals and atmosphere, the story content, the gameplay segments contained within, or just because you like the movie it's based on. I think it's more fun that way because setting parameters makes the whole exercise a bit more predictable. You can still probably guess the top 3, but I think it's a less obvious and closer battle than the character video. To quell any potential dissatisfaction with what I did and didn't list as votable worlds, let's go over some things that didn't make the cut and whether or not I was right or wrong about it. Well, I didn't include anything that I consider non-canon, so I'm sorry to all the VCast fans, no Swashbuckler's Island or Obstacle Course. And I didn't mean to go all Dad from Footloose on you, but I didn't include Melody of Memory because, you know, they're not really worlds, they're just 1 or 2 music tracks, as fun as they may be to play. Would have really bloated the drop-downs for not a lot of payoff. Arguably, I should have included the recoded datascape or system sectors or whatever you want to call them, although I tend to consider the system sector portions to just be part of the worlds they appear in. I will admit it was inconsistent and a mistake to not include KH2's Badlands or Keyblade Graveyard, Dream Drop's Destiny Islands, and KH3 Remind's Quadratum. Obviously you only visit any of those places briefly for boss fights, but I did include similar cases. I don't think too many people are attached to the Phantom Ursula fight to burn a vote on DDDDI, but still, my bad. There's a few other caveats, but it makes more sense to go over them as we reach their respective points in the video. And like last time, I kept the survey open until I got just a little over 5,000 responses, meaning we're looking at about 25,000 separate votes. Which brings us to the start of our world tour. Or does it? Because across those 25,000 votes, every world on the survey got at least 1 vote, except for 1. Unlike the character video, this time we actually have a definitive least popular world, a world that truly no one cherishes or even thought to toss a meme vote to. I made a community post asking the commenters to guess which one, and it took about 160-ish comments, but someone did eventually get it, so a big shout out to ZanTheManic5802 because the least popular Kingdom Hearts world is Beast Castle in Dark Road. A lot of people had the right idea, something that appears multiple times, isn't mind-blowingly good or notoriously bad, just a world that no one would think of in the way of praise, ridicule, or memery. A couple of other worlds fit that mold, and we'll get to them very soon, but Dark Road's Beast Castle was just the unluckiest of the bunch. Yeah, can't tell you much about this place, or many Dark Road worlds for that matter, because I downloaded the app and never actually got around to playing it. And now it's, you know, dead. But Damo's got some great coverage of it. We're really splitting hairs to analyze this at all, but Beast Castle is one of the quote-unquote least playable of the Dark Road worlds, tied with one other that only had 5 quests. I watched Dark Road almost 3 years ago, and all I really remember about Beast Castle is Vala showing up and dancing next to the piano in the ballroom. I guess she did a shit job. To add insult to injury for poor Dark Road Beast Castle, there's only 3 worlds that got just 1 vote. One of them being the Union Cross iteration of Beast Castle, so clearly this place is just not meant for 2D. It gave us the first appearance of Prince Adam in Kingdom Hearts, and I think that's such a shame, so 1 vote here seems like a bit much. I'm also pretty sure that this was just a meme vote since the other 4 submissions from this voter were all fairly unpopular worlds and not likely someone's actual favorites. So truly, mobile Beast Castles are the lowest of the low apparently. I should note that technically Beast Castle and other worlds made appearances in the browser game Kingdom Hearts Key before showing up in Union Cross, but considering most people answering the survey have likely not played a Japan-exclusive browser game, I lumped it in with Union Cross for our purposes here. Also netting 1 vote is the Union Cross appearance of Enchanted Dominion, making it and Beast Castle the least popular Union Cross worlds, but we're really talking a game of millimeters here. Besides Maleficent talking to Darkness here, I couldn't tell you a thing about this place. But the person who submitted it said that more people would appreciate the level design of Union Cross if it wasn't limited to a 2D phone game. And our other 1 vote receiver is the Dark Road version of the Dominion, and it was a mistake to have this on the survey because I totally forgot you never actually go here as Xehanort, it's entirely cutscene based. So a big apology to all the unplayable appearances of Destiny Islands and Disney Castle, and the KH3 Secret Forest, not that I think any of them would have gotten much traction given how this world did. But, rip to Hodor. Moving on to the 2 votes club, this is actually tied with the 3 vote group for the biggest group in the survey. Lots of mobile game worlds here, starting with Agrabah and Dark Road. This is literally the 7th time the world appears, so yeah, I think Agrabah fatigue is showing here. I remember Jafar trying to manipulate the underclassmen, Ericus walking like a carpet, and that's about it. And these Dark Road worlds are really dropping like flies because we've also got its version of Olympus Coliseum here, which, to be honest, I think is easily the most interesting of the Disney worlds in that game. Not that I truly expected people to stump for it in this survey, but it being tied with or lower than these other worlds is a shame because it actually has some cool Disney World and KH original interplay. Hades knowing anything at all about the deceased upperclassmen is really cool and not the type of thing we tend to get a ton of these days. We've got our first appearance of a recoded world on the list here, which is the game's Dive to the Heart. But in fairness, these things are really on the cusp of worldhood, so I wouldn't truly consider this the lowest recoded world. All of the Dive to the Hearts are just tutorials to a degree. KH2's is probably the least tutorial-y since it takes place the furthest into its game, but they've all got a cool atmosphere to them. Again, I don't really blame you if you don't consider them worlds, in fact I usually don't, but I figured people would complain if I didn't have them as options. As for why anyone picked this Dive to the Heart over the others, I could not fathom a guess. Got some Union Cross fodder to eliminate, specifically some creepy little bug guys to squash, because this is where Cybug Sector landed. It's the Hero's Duty subworld within the greater Wreck-It Ralph world of Game Central Station. These are another weird case because you could argue they're not fully fledged worlds, but they've got their own logos as you can see here, which is actually more than I can say for the Dives to the Heart or a handful of other more substantial things. Neither of you left notes on why you picked this, so I'm guessing you just really like insects, or guns, or Glee. But probably not all 3, right? I feel like that's a pretty narrow Ventus diagram. Also falling here is the Union Cross version of Castle of Dreams, and god, I got nothing. I guess the Lady Tremaine-inspired Heartless is kinda cool. We're losing our first Chain of Memories worlds in this round, starting with Neverland. I should also say, some people argued that I should have included options for both the GBA com and Recom, and while I appreciate your fervor for thoroughness, I again think it would have led to just even more drop-down bloat. There's definitely an exception where the difference between GBA and PS2 was considerable beyond just cosmetics and minor gameplay changes, which we'll get to. But for the most part, if you voted for a COM world, we can just assume you mean one or the other or both. One of Neverland's voters noted that they tend to like some of the more conventionally unpopular worlds, giving props to COM Neverland for the GBA version's Hook boss fight, the Moogle airstrike, and the line, "Is it just me or are all the rooms starting to look the same?" And the last of the 2 vote receivers is COM Olympus Coliseum. One of the votes came from someone who just voted for 5 different versions of Olympus, so hard to say if they're a diehard Hercules fan or a troll. Or maybe a satyr in this case. To its credit, COM Olympus shakes up the formula a little bit, giving us the mid-world boss with Cloud and the subsequent summon card for him, the first and so far only time a Final Fantasy character is summonable in the series. It also switches up on retreading KH1, instead ending the world with a fight against Hades instead of Cerberus. I remember the Hades fight in this world giving me a ton of trouble on the GBA version as a kid, and on any playthroughs afterwards, I would save Olympus for last in that first cycle of worlds, because I needed all the buffs I could get. Kicking off the 3 voters, we've got some more Dark Road detritus to shovel out, starting with Wonderland, which I mainly remember for Xehanort and company's interactions with the Queen of Hearts and the Reaper Heartless that shows up as the boss. Unfortunately, I think at least one of you misclicked this because you cited your appreciation for how cool the Bazaar Room is, which doesn't exactly factor into the Dark Road appearance of Wonderland a whole lot. I guess I could have just moved this vote to KH1 Wonderland, but you reap what you sow, just like that Reaper Heartless. But another one of you noted that you voted for Dark Road Wonderland because this is where you started to appreciate Dark Road's story and how the situation with the Queen of Hearts seemed to actually have an impact on Xehanort's character. And I'd have to concur, that's pretty neat. Our other Dark Road world this round is Dwarf Woodlands. One of you said you just like the vibes here, which there is no explanation I respect more. I'm assuming the other two just like that scene of Ver lifting the boulder, or maybe the lore drop of Xehanort saying that he totally didn't go bald and shaved his head as a sign of his resolve. I'm not kidding, by the way. If you didn't watch Dark Road, that's actually canon. Anyway, what a surprise, a bunch of Union Cross worlds too, starting with Niceland, which is Ralph and Felix's hometown. One of you noted that you really want Wreck-It Ralph in a real game, but the same person also then used their other 4 votes on Symphony of Sorcery, which I threw out. That was not very Niceland of you. A different voter said, I like the big towns and cities in KH, just places with nice looking homes and buildings, and that is so pleasant and very Niceland of you, thank you for not cheating. To its credit, Niceland has a pretty fun field theme. It's got that nostalgic 8-bit vibe that makes you want to jump over some barrels or stomp some Koopas. Also in the 3-vote Cucks Club, yep, that's what I'm calling it, it's Wonderland. I've got even less to say about this version of Wonderland, but I do at least remember it for the sequence of Alice turning into a kaiju inside the White Rabbit's house. It comes from the movie, of course, but this was the only time they adapted it for Kingdom Hearts. Hey, let's kill another Olympus Coliseum while we're here. This time it's the Union Cross version. One of these votes was from the aforementioned Olympus superfan, and another was surely a misclick because that person's other 4 votes were much more conventional, so I doubt anyone actually gives a shit about this place. Oh my god, can you go away? Hi, least popular 358 Days Over 2 World Olympus Coliseum, why did they make a slightly different world icon for you? At least I actually have context for every vote here. Once again, the Olympus superfan, someone who used all 5 votes on Days Worlds because they just really like Days, and one person who voted for it because it gave us more Demyx content than anywhere else in the series. Which, fair enough, there are some all-timer Demyx moments here. And to its credit, I did always like how the actual Coliseum here would physically transform from battle to battle beyond just slightly changing the size of the arena like in KH1 and 2. Plus, we got that random Xigbar fight in the middle of the game here. And our last 3-vote recipient is Agrabah, but not Union Cross Agrabah? Nope, it's actually Chain of Memories Agrabah. Once again, someone voted for 5 different Agrabahs, which it's tempting to throw them out, but I am choosing to give the benefit of the doubt. Like with the last entry, someone also put down 5 Calm Worlds because it was their first KH game, which respect. I don't have a ton of good to say about Agrabah. It's got yet another fucking Genie Jafar fight, which is, once again, bad in both versions. At least you get a good enemy card from it. Moving on to 4 votes, we've got Union Cross Dwarf Woodlands. It sure was in the game. I remember one time I was at either a Hot Topic or a box lunch with my girlfriend, and we saw a bunch of those Loungefly mini backpacks that are like Disney themed, and the Snow White one just had Union Cross assets on it. Like just clearly Snow White and the Prince from Union Cross. And I don't think it was like a bootleg, I'm pretty sure it was legit. Anyway, that's all I've got. Also in this group are another 2 Calm Worlds, including Monstro. I'll stump for KH1 Monstro, but there's not really a whole lot going on in its Chain of Memories form. It's at least home to a version of A Very Small Wish, my favorite KH track, and one of you noted that your world picks were specifically related to how much you enjoyed the music there. Another voter really likes Monstro and also voted for the KH1 version and Prankster's Paradise, and they cited the visual absurdity and grotesque vibes of the whale's innards. I guess Calm Monstro is another fairly unique world in the game since its main boss is at the middle point, whereas the last key room is more like a minigame, so there's that. The other Calm world with 4 votes is Wonderland. I remember playing up to Wonderland when I first got Chain of Memories on Christmas Eve of 2004 and thinking, wow, what the fuck is going on in this game? I was 8, but my internal monologue was definitely saying fuck. Wonderland is already a confusing, zany environment, and injecting that with Chain of Memories energy just cranks things up to 11. A big anti-shout-out to the Trickmaster fight during Riku's story, what an asshole. Here we have our first standalone entry, well, besides Dark Road Beast Castle, in 98th place with 5 votes is Chain of Memories Atlantica. Judging from the picks that came alongside it for a few voters, 3 of these people are either meme lords or ride or die Little Mermaid stans. Plus the person from earlier whose first KH game was Calm. So that leaves one person who specifically noted that Calm Atlantica was not a misclick. I wish I knew a bit more about their choice because I'm struggling to think of the appeal. I think Atlantica is one of the least memorable Calm worlds, also not helped by just not even attempting aquatic forms for the party, and feeling more retready than most of the other Disney worlds in Chain of Memories. That brings us to the 6-vote group, starting with another goddamn Agrabah, and finally the version from Union Cross. I actually expected it to do better given its sort of infamous status as a Tartarus within the already excruciatingly slow-paced gacha game. That is, I figured it would get more meme votes. Which, again, judging from the votes that came alongside Agrabah, I think 5 of them are meme votes. Save for one person who said, I used to dread traversing those endless deserts in Union Cross's Agrabah, but now I'd give anything to go back. I'm pretty sure this is some sort of delayed Stockholm Syndrome, but I can kind of commiserate. It's like feeling nostalgic for high school, but in reality, you don't actually miss it because it was an oppressive hellscape, but you had your friends and less responsibility. I didn't stick with Union Cross all the way through, but there was a time where it was comfy to just pull out my phone and get some KH dopamine, as middling as it may have been. Another Union Cross world with 6 votes is the Keyblade Graveyard. If I were a big Graveyard fan, I probably would have used one of my votes on the BBS or KH3 versions. But one of you appreciated that you actually got to see the Keyblade War of Legend in the Union Cross version, so I suppose there's at least that. But otherwise, to me, it's a flat world in an already flat game, so moving on. To a pair of Birth by Sleep worlds, marking that game's first and lowest appearance in our results. Understandably, one of the two is BBS Mysterious Tower, which is little more than a pit stop in the late game for some cutscenes and 3 unremarkable areas returning from KH2. Looking at responses and the adjacent votes, I have no reason to believe a single person actually has legitimate love for this place because it's truly such a nothing. And not even in a sexy, base-filled Zemnis way. Our other BBS world here is, wouldn't you know, another Olympus Coliseum. And I have to say, while I'm not shocked at the other lower Olympus placements, this one surprises me a little bit, if only because I figured it'd be a bit more cherished thanks to the appearance of Zack. He's the standout feature, besides the town near Thebes of course, and everything else is kinda just a watered-down version of typical Olympus fare from older games. It isn't even good for being home to the recurring tournaments because the Mirage Arena fills that niche in this game, which, yes, Mirage Arena scored higher than everything so far. We've got 2 worlds with 7 votes, including what I think is fair to say the true least popular world in Recoded, Destiny Islands. Again, still something of a tutorial, but it introduces the core gameplay mechanics and the system sectors. For the most part, the world plays things fairly straight, and the one thing I'll give Coded is its variety of playstyles and gimmicks across its worlds. But you kind of need to establish some baseline normality before veering from the path, so it's understandable that Destiny Islands is relatively plain. At least we got some sorely needed Titus, Waka, and selfie content. Our other 7-vote world is Chain of Memories Hollow Bastion. It hurts to see any form of this beautiful world this early on in the video, but we've got plenty more Bastions to come. A handful of people just voted for every version of Hollow Bastion and Radiant Garden, noting that it's the best overall world in the series. No specifics on the Calm incarnation, which I don't think is overwhelmingly good or bad. It's basically a Disney-ified version of the KH1 world, since the plot doesn't touch any of the Riku, Kairi, or Ansem stuff. Instead, it's all about Beast, Belle, and Maleficent. Kind of an oddity considering Maleficent isn't from the other two's source material. If you hadn't seen the movies and jumped in with Calm, it would be forgivable if you thought they all came from the same film. Nothing got exactly 8 votes, so we move on to our sole 9-vote recipient, which is Candy Kingdom from Union Cross, once again another Ralph subworld and the highest of the 3. And I mean, it's the most visually interesting of the bunch, but I'm always a sucker for candy or food-themed worlds. And unlike a ton of the previous responses, I don't get the impression that a single one of these votes were for the meme because of the world's relative obscurity. To echo an earlier note left for Niceland, it would honestly be really cool to see this world be given full game treatment, though I wonder if there's any real shot for that by this point. Back to some ties for a bit. In the 11-vote category, we've got 3 worlds, including another appearance from Days, this time being Wonderland. Yeah, to be honest, not sure how this made it higher than even Days Olympus. I guess it technically added all those hedge maze areas, so we actually got new environments, which can't be said of many Days worlds. On the other hand, sometimes less is more. If you're super fond of Luxord, and I'm trying to say Luxord now because I won't be able to get away with it for much longer, then I suppose this world might hold a special place in your heart. But nobody gave any explicit reasoning for this pick besides one person just really liking Days, so beats me. Also in the 11-vote group are another 2 Calm worlds, one of them being Halloween Town. Yeah, honestly, it's one of the more interesting Chain of Memories Disney worlds, mainly for the stuff with Oogie Boogie and the weird waking nightmare inflicted on him by the Doctor's memory potion. A handful of votes came from people who just really like Halloween Town and voted for its other iterations too. The other Calm world in this group is Traverse Town. Once again, about half of the votes here are from people who just really dig Traverse Town and voted for its other appearances as well. On its own, I also think Traverse Town is one of the better Calm worlds, even in spite of it being the tutorial level. I think it does a great job at setting the stage for how mindfucky and oppressive Castle Oblivion is. So much so that I wish the other worlds followed through a bit on some of the stuff that the Final Fantasy crew is playing with here. I mean, it probably would have been a bit tiring if Sora tried to convince every Disney character he ran into that he already knows them, but it does leave some of the remaining worlds feeling a bit hollow, and not just the Bastion. At 14 votes, we've got 2 worlds, including the first appearance of a KH3 world, sort of. The KH3 version of Land of Departure is little more than a boss arena and something you can't return to after that Vanitas fight. But, you know, it's here for the sake of completion. As for why people voted for it, I don't really get the impression that all 14 votes were for the meme, but no one left any reasoning to explain the choice either. I'm personally not even that big a fan of the BBS Land of Departure because it's hardly even a fuller experience than this one. But it's at least a backdrop to the satisfying plot development of Ventus waking up from his coma. Because you can't spell coma without calm. Because Land of Departure is also Castle Oblivion, which is where calm is set. Awesome wordplay aside, the other 14-vote recipient is the coded version of Traverse Town, aka Duck Retrieving Simulator 2010. But I actually really liked a note someone left with their vote. They said, growing up I was always having to round up my younger cousins, so something about the story in coded Traverse Town always reminds me of home. Just goes to show that even if I don't particularly care about something in one of these worlds, it might resonate with someone for reasons I wouldn't really think of. Moving on to the 15-vote worlds, we've got two here, starting with the most popular Disney world in either of the mobile titles, Game Central Station. Which makes sense, it's the only new world in Union Cross besides Daybreak Town, and technically if you're voting for Game Central Station, you're also voting for the other three sub-worlds contained within. Which, and I don't think this is a hot take, all three of them are more visually interesting than this main hub area. Once again, a few of you expressed your desire for a fully fledged Wreck-It Ralph world in a traditional game. Tied with GCS is the coded version of Wonderland. Crazy how Wonderland shows up 6 times in the series, and we've already seen it 5 times in these results. The most memorable part of coded Wonderland is arguably the shooter segment against Trickmaster and the Heartless that precede it. To its credit, it's probably more engaging than most of the gummy segments in the numbered titles. I guess the Inkling thing is also actually pretty cool. I'd love to see a sequence like that in, frankly, a game that isn't recoded. Yet another tie between two worlds that got 17 votes, including Agrabah as seen in coded. I think Agrabah lies somewhere between the more straightforward coded worlds that we've already covered and the ones with zanier gimmicks that we've yet to reach, so its spot in the middle of those groups makes sense. It has the whole frozen time thing with the world going Mountain Dew mode, and it adds some new Cave of Wonders areas, which I can appreciate. I appreciate these things through gritted teeth, but I am appreciating them all the same. I've realized that I really shouldn't be too mean to coded, because coded fans can fuck me up with their combos real quick. Also getting 17 votes is another glorified boss arena from KH3, the Dark World. While I think it's much less visually interesting and narratively fulfilling than KH3 Land of Departure, you do end up spending more time here as both Riku and Sora. Notably, it's the site of the Anti-Aqua reveal and battle, and I think the less said about Anti-Aqua the better. But I'd have to agree that this is the least whelming appearance that the Dark World has taken, especially because the Realm of Darkness sounds so much cooler than the Dark World. But it seems like we've seen a bit of a nomenclature retcon. Now we've got a bit of a stretch of single entries, starting with our 19 vote getter in 81st place, Days Agrabah. Of the Days worlds, I have to say, Agrabah is one of the locales I most dread, but like its younger recoded brother, it at least adds some substantial new stuff by way of the Cave of Wonders. But being home to the Pete Tailing mission is a slight against, frankly, humanity. But in a way, it's kinda cool that this Agrabah is a synthesis of KH1s and 2s thanks to the inclusion of the Sandswept Ruins and how it also boasts its own Days exclusive areas. And at least the Antlion doesn't make me want to bury myself in sand and never come up for air like some other Days bosses. Curiously, most of the homes to the really bad ones haven't shown up yet. In 80th place with 21 votes, yet another KH3 pseudo-world, it's our most recent romp in Radiant Garden. But to call it a romp is probably a bit too generous because it's really a claustrophobic stroll in Merlin's house as Riku. And that's only in Remind, of course. Before that, this was just your one-stop shop for exposition slop. Sorry, I love KH3 and really appreciate the interstitials between Disney worlds, but that Riku and Mickey scene in the central square is rough. This world received a mixture of meme votes and people who were genuinely appreciative of the garden serving as the nexus to the data fights, which are pretty universally acclaimed, so hard to be too mad at the pick. Continuing the trend of these quote-unquote lesser KH3 worlds, we've got one of the bigger blemishes on the game for me personally. In 79th place with 22 votes is KH3's take on the 100 Acre Wood. This always just rang to me as a case of either fully commit or don't do it at all. I've thought about how this comparatively short visit to the wood can make narrative sense, but it's mainly just copium and me trying to justify why this usually fully fleshed out minigame world was reduced to a triply copy-pasted Candy Crush clone all contained within Rabbit's front yard. The stuff that gets touched on regarding Sora and Pooh's waning connection is interesting and maybe something that'll see more payoff in the future, but in the moment this felt pretty needless. The worst thing you can do is take me out of the experience of existing in the game's universe and make me wonder why this was so markedly different and obviously shorter than previous trips to the wood, including the Chain of Memories visit. Well, at least it looks pretty and the new Bounce-A-Rama track is fun. Speaking of, in 78th place with 25 votes is, in fact, the Chain of Memories version of 100 Acre Wood. But I should specify, because this is a case of a world being massively improved between GBA and PS2, a ton of people who put this down noted that they are specifically voting for the Recom version, not the original. And for good reason, because the GBA version of the wood is either a brisk nothing or a drawn-out slog, whereas Recom's is home to some genuinely fun minigames. This also means that 100 Acre Wood is the most popular Disney world in COM, which I definitely didn't expect, but I suppose if I really thought about it beforehand, it makes sense, if only for sticking out so much in a game where people aren't exactly wild about the combat to begin with. Continuing the COM train, in 77th place with 27 votes is the very first appearance of Twilight Town. Honestly, too low. I won't argue that there's obviously a more iconic appearance of the town, but the degree of mystique and intrigue this place was throwing around in 2004 is unmatched. When operating under the assumption that every world Sora visits in COM is based on a place he's been before, well, that gets a young mind theorizing. I was like, did he vacation here as a baby and doesn't fully remember? Not to mention things really start to ramp up with the organization here, given the, termination of Vexen via the Axel Express. That's the name of one of those trains at Sunset Station. And in 76th place with 28 votes is the debut appearance of Dwarf Woodlands in Birth by Sleep. This makes it the least popular of the new worlds introduced in BBS, and yeah, I can see that. As much of a technical marvel Snow White was when it came out and how important it is, I doubt it's the favorite old-school princess movie for most of a modern audience. The world doesn't really have many memorable story moments, and I could see the other two princess worlds doing better solely based on their art direction. I don't think this world is bad by any stretch. It doesn't have any low lows, but also not many high highs to speak of. Sadly, it doesn't have any high hoes either, like the dwarf song. Back to some ties, with 30 votes we have Chain of Memories Destiny Islands. I remember this world being a surprise when I first played COM, despite most worlds being places Sora had been to in the past. I guess given that it didn't show up before or right around Traverse Town, I figured they weren't going to bother rehashing the tutorial world from KH1. So it was definitely a wow moment when I first saw that Destiny Islands card. And I should say, they certainly didn't rehash the KH1 version, because this world plays out entirely differently and we get some good character development for Sora, Naminé, and especially Riku on his trip. And for Sora, this world is on the heels of his momentary breakup with Donald and Goofy, so it's something of a lonely experience. Also, I'm a big fan of that field theme rearrangement, a good call because I think the bombastic nature of the original track would have clashed pretty awkwardly with the tone of the game at that point in the story. Tied with COM Destiny Islands is a world from Coded, that world being Hollow Bastion. I can't believe how much begrudging credit I'm giving Coded so far, but I do have to agree that this is one of the better outings in that game. I think having Donald and Goofy serve as your main combat assets for this world is a really cool callback to Beast being your bodyguard in KH1 during the Wooden Sword segment. It's one of the more literal interpretations and executions of My Friends Are My Power in the series. And it's extra nice because Donald and Goofy just met this version of Sora and they're still willing to help him, to put their lives on the line for him. Whereas I would have right-clicked him and sent him to the trash. Also, this world gave us...
Mickey! It's Riku! They put bugs in him!
What?
So you gotta love it just for that alone. Tied at 31 votes, the Dark Road for Dark Road ends here because this is where Scala ad Kylum landed. Understandable that this was the most popular world in the game, it fleshed out one of the coolest and most mysterious locations from KH3. Getting to see young Ericus and Xehanort pal around with their former classmates was at least something of a novelty, and everything involving Baldur here was actually pretty gripping as far as the mobile game stuff goes at least. Despite this outing giving the world more context as this esteemed Keyblade Academy, I think it's hard to beat that initial grandeur from the KH3 appearance. And, it's nice getting to freely walk around and explore it in a 3D space. Also getting 31 votes, somehow, is the KH3 Dive to the Heart. Pretty damning that this managed to beat KH3's 100 Acre Wood, because the DTH is down there with Coded's for least world-like. At least KH1s and 2s have a bit of meat to them, but KH3's is like the mirror, your difficulty and easy or pro code stuff, and then the shadows and dark side. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's all cool, I especially like all of the memories floating around during that first part, but you don't get to stay there for very long for it to leave much of an impression. In fairness, I don't know if KH3 necessarily needed a KH1 or even KH2 length dive to the heart. This feels like something that was more so included just for the sake of tradition, and for that I think it's more than serviceable. Got a single entry between some ties here, and 71st place with 33 votes is the Birth by Sleep appearance of the Land of Departure. Considering that starting worlds tend to do really well, as we'll see, this is again pretty damning to see Land of Departure this low. I definitely have some nostalgia for it, there's this sense of grandiosity it gives off, but I always wish we could have gotten a bit more from it, both in terms of getting more playtime here and some more backstory on what the place is all about. Sometimes knowing less is more, but in this case, I feel like the world comes off as half-finished or at least not fully conceptualized. Not to be a hater though, because I still like this place, I just wanted it to reach higher potential. I really think it would have served the story and especially the TVA relationship so much better if we were to get even the amount of time here that Sora had on Destiny Islands in KH1. With 36 votes, we've got two worlds that kinda go hand in hand here, and not in the Traverse Town battle theme way. First up is the Dark World as it appears in Birth by Sleep Final Mix. I specify Final Mix because this whole episode with Aqua was not present in the original release. I don't mind the Realm of Darkness, I get that the point of it is that it's, dark, but I always found the art direction employed in places like End of the World or the 0.2 version of the Dark World way more engaging. The BBS version is very samey all throughout, but it's kind of like a bonus onion ring in your french fries. It's hard to be too mad at it, unless you're allergic to onions, I guess. Getting to finally have control of a character in the Realm of Darkness was at least something new and exciting for the time, even if I wouldn't exactly describe the place as a top tourist destination. Tied with the Dark World in BBS is something of a successor, the Forest of Thorns from 0.2. So again, kind of an on-the-cusp case with these 0.2 locations. The four areas in 0.2 aren't really worlds in the traditional sense, but they're all visually distinct and based on places that are fully fledged worlds, namely the trio of princess worlds from Birth by Sleep. Given that those worlds had fallen to darkness by the time Aqua explores them, it's fair to say that these literally are the worlds themselves given new form. The Forest of Thorns is based on Enchanted Dominion, and while I'd agree it's the least interesting of the three princess areas, it's still got some great level design, and the sequence toward the end with all the dark sides and the hellish background was legitimately breathtaking. With 38 votes, we've got our first appearance of KH2 on the list, albeit through the pseudo-world that is Disney Castle. Some people argued that I should have lumped it in with Timeless River, but the game treats them as pretty distinct locations. Make no mistake, Disney Castle is little more than a glorified nexus to a much more popular world, but that didn't stop this many people from voting for it, for whatever reason. I've talked about this before, but I did always appreciate how every room besides the Cornerstone room is something you see in KH1, so getting to finally explore the castle, especially after knowing it was planned to be playable in the first game, was really gratifying. Tied with Disney Castle is the day's incarnation of Halloween Town, and the most recent Halloween Town, which is kinda crazy. A little surprised to see this as high as it is, considering unlike some other Days worlds, we didn't get any new areas to explore here. There's a few little alterations, but it's largely the same place as the KH1 version, minus Fink's Lab. Plus, it's home to the fifth horseman of the apocalypse, the Leech Grave. Roxas also spends the vast majority of his time here getting prank-bombed in the face by the kindergarten dropouts, so in short, yeah, I guess I'm struggling to find the appeal of this outing, but I'm glad some people like it. Back to a solo entry, in 66th place with 39 votes is the Mirage Arena. I guess color me somewhat surprised to see the Mirage Arena do this well, considering if I had to name every world in every KH game, this would probably be the one most likely to slip through the cracks. I do really dig the spacey, dreamy aesthetic it's got going on though, more so than any of the arena matches it has to offer. I always viewed this place as a real case of untapped potential. I just think with a title like the Mirage Arena, the way was fully paved to make a ton of wacky, more out-there battles a reality, but things are relatively tame outside of like Monstro and the Master Armors, and even those weren't included until Final Mix. Still, I'd rather some form of tournament-style gameplay as opposed to nothing, and you can't say the Mirage Arena doesn't offer that. It also offers Rumble Racing, so I take back anything nice I may have said. And back to some ties, with 44 votes is our first fully fledged KH2 world, Agrabah. Yeah, KH2 Agrabah is kind of like BBS Dwarf Woodlands for me. There's nothing terrible or amazing about it, it's like bog standard KH2. The Cave of Wonders took a big hit, and the city is less interesting to explore, and there's no organization visitor, and the entire second visit confining you to the carpet is a bit underwhelming. Okay, so maybe it's erring toward the less remarkable side of things for me personally. That being said, Kingdom Heartsifying The Return of Jafar was interesting, and I guess I'd rather play this world than watch the direct-to-VHS sequel, so good job? I said this way back when I ranked the KH2 worlds, and I apologize now if I end up reiterating those points this whole video, but Agrabah is the world that feels the most familiar and like a full continuation of what happened in KH1. So while I can feel a bit unremarkable and by the books, you're still experiencing a generally fun formula, so it's not my least favorite KH2 world by any stretch. Tied with KH2 Agrabah is the Depths of Darkness from 0.2, and I think we have to stop down and pick this one apart a bit. There are 4 worlds in 0.2, the first 3 being themed after those BBS Princess worlds, with the last one, the Depths of Darkness, looking much more similar to the Dark World as it appears in BBS Final Mix and KH3. It's that portion immediately after the Forest of Thorns where Mickey is in your party. Given the description I just gave of it, you might be as perplexed as I am how it managed to crawl up this high. Not that 65th to 64th place is amazing, but it beat out some legitimate locations in more popular games. I think this is honestly my fault because people don't hear or read something like The Depths of Darkness and immediately know what that refers to. It's mostly just turbo nerds like me who go, ah yeah, that one area at the end of 0.2. I think it's decently likely that a sizable chunk of voters saw Depths of Darkness parentheses 0.2 and figured it might refer to the entire world space of the whole game. Or maybe there's truly just some big fans of those glowy rock pillars. The truth is probably a synthesis of both. Kupo. Another tie here, 2 worlds with 46 votes, one of them being the Days version of Neverland. I doubt I'll ever do a Days world ranking. I feel like that whole 2.5-hour shindig where I covered every single day probably suffices, but I do think Neverland would be in the upper half of the game for me, as it is for the voters it seems. It's not the most exciting world, but it does at least let us set foot in Neverland proper, even if it's not exactly earth-shattering. I think just getting that degree of freshness from Days at that point in the game gives Neverland a bit of a boost for me. I always love the moments of Roxas and Axel learning how to fly, and the new tracks used for the field and battle themes are really underrated. I was pleasantly surprised when Melody of Memory brought them back. We'll just pretend Ruler of the Sky didn't happen. Our other 46-vote world is Castle Oblivion as it appears in Coded. Again, as much guff as I give Coded, this world is probably the one most worth experiencing, I'll say. Not really the most fun to play, but if you absolutely had to watch the recoded movie but only had time for some of it, in this bizarre scenario that I've crafted, then I suppose you should at least watch the Castle Oblivion chapter. I can't go as far to say that I find a lot of it especially poignant because you are certainly wading through a ton of gobbledygook to get to the point here, and it is a belabored point. But Data Roxas is at least kinda interesting, and it was admittedly unexpected for Castle Oblivion to even show up again. I felt fairly confident that Chain of Memories would have been the last of it in a playable capacity. Now we've got a long stretch of single entries up till the top 50, and kicking that off in 61st place with 47 votes is Arendelle. I know it's the chalk pick for the least favorite KH3 world besides the pseudo-worlds we've already covered, but I'm actually still surprised it did this poorly. Especially because I would have expected a bigger chunk of meme votes, which some of these 47 votes already are. But a handful of people who did vote for Arendelle also felt compelled to clarify in the notes section that they really do like it and that they weren't trolling by voting for it. Arendelle is by no means my favorite, but I've softened on it a bit since KH3 came out because it really does have some fun set pieces and world design. It's just that all that stuff is covered in that samey, snowy mush. And I think a fair amount of Arendelle backlash also stems from this false idea that Disney forced Frozen and the Let It Go sequence into the game, when in reality Nomura was always going to put Arendelle in the game on his own accord. If you're in the mood for some myth-busting, check this video here. But yeah, not too surprised that this is the lowest of the traditional Disney worlds in KH3. I think the more interesting question is what's second to last, because I tend to see everything else regarded pretty equally well. But we'll get to that soon enough. Next up, in 60th place with 49 votes, it's Disney Town from Birth by Sleep, which is kind of a weird place because it's ostensibly a minigame world, but there's also just monsters roaming the streets and basement. It's like being in the 100 Acre Wood, but turning the wrong page and getting your ass beat. Interestingly, I feel like Disney Town is sort of an inverse of Arendelle, where I find the visuals and environment a lot more fun in Disney Town, but the minigames are a bit lacking. Frozen Slider and the Olaf body part search are some of the better parts of Arendelle, and I'll stand by that. I don't have a ton of love for Ice Cream Beat, and especially not Rumble Racing, but at least Fruit Ball is a citrus-filled free-for-all clusterfuck. I think the concept of the world is cool though, having it set during this yearly festival, though the execution leaves a bit to be desired. Because, like, doesn't the place always look like a clown puked on Toontown, or is that the festival at work? Also, remember the scene of the brooms slowly and literally dragging Pete to hell? It really is a magical place. Disney Town, I mean, not hell. I mean, who's to say? I guess it depends on your definition of magical. Taking a bit of a jump here in votes, with 59 fittingly in 59th place, is another Birth by Sleep world, Castle of Dreams. It seems the audience and I agree on the order of the 3 princess worlds, though I'm a little surprised to see Castle of Dreams this low. Granted, I'm mainly a fan of it for the Ven visit, and I don't think that's the main reason most people would have voted for it, though I could be wrong. But outside of the shrunken down mousecapades, I do think the world is fairly generic. It's kind of like a blend between Dwarf Woodlands and Country of the Musketeers from Dream Drop. Bibbidi-Bobbidi-Boo on loop sure is a choice. Even though the world design isn't anything amazing, I do find Aqua's visit pretty memorable, if only for the glass slipper sequence and the step family being firebombed to hell. It really is a magical place. The Castle of Dreams, I mean, not hell. In 58th place with 61 votes is our most popular recoded world. Pretty impressive to see it go this far. It's Olympus Coliseum. Kinda bonkers that there exists a Kingdom Hearts game where Olympus is actually the consensus favorite, but recoded is a special breed. The Olympus we see encoded is home to easily the most dramatic of the gimmicks the game employs across its worlds, turning the combat into a more traditional RPG style. No more action, just RPG. Kind of ironic how Recoded is the installment that's lauded as a game that has this deceptively deep and satisfying combat system, only for its most popular world to be the one that does away with all of that. To be honest, I never fully understood why Olympus was the world that did this, but maybe it's just because Cloud Strife is milling about here. While the shakeup here is certainly bold, it wasn't something I found particularly enjoyable as someone who has played literally any other RPG ever. But I will say, for those of you who really enjoy Coded Olympus, you should really check out something like a Final Fantasy X. It's kinda like this, except very good. Moving up to 67 votes, in 57th place is our next KH2 world, the Land of Dragons. Yeah, I have very little love for this world, and I'd have to imagine a bulk of its votes come from people who enjoy Mulan, or maybe the music here, because both tracks are really good. I don't know, Land of Dragons was always so blah to me. It's not particularly fun to explore or visually appealing, and it's the first Disney World you're expected to go to in the game. I know Wonderland in KH1 is probably a less exciting property, but I think it comes out feeling way more memorable within its game as your first true foray into the Disney side of Kingdom Hearts. For the record, I don't mean to talk primarily negative about any of these worlds because, like, this was in 67 people's top 5. But I think it'd be pretty boring if I just listed the results and moved on, or told lies about how I love every single one of these worlds. That being said, Land of Dragons isn't without its fun stuff, like the Storm Rider boss fight or the Riku appearance, because the world had very little going on in terms of the external KH plot without that little boost in the second visit. Next up, in 56th place with 71 votes, another KH2 location, it's Roxas's Dive to the Heart. Once again, not something I personally would consider a world if you put a gun to my head, which, relax, that's really dramatic, we're talking about video games. But on the other hand, I'm kinda glad I had it on the survey because 71 people voted for it, so it's clearly not just a nothing. The KH2 dive is obviously not as drawn out as the first games, probably because it's not being used as this introductory set piece, but it still has some pizzazz to it, largely by way of the Twilight Thorn boss fight. In terms of spectacle, I think it's easily on the Mount Rushmore of KH2 bosses, even despite it ultimately just being a tougher Darkside. That battle is obviously the centerpiece of KH2's dive, but the build-up to that fight and the parallels to Sora's original dive also help make the experience memorable, enough to defeat a bunch of more traditional, fully fledged worlds in this survey, apparently. Up next, in 55th place with 79 votes, and kudos to Dream Drop for making it this far, it's La Cité des Cloches. These surveys can be a bit of a reality check for me because it reminds me, oh, my opinion actually isn't law? Not that I'm exactly Quasimodo's bravest soldier, but I've got two other DDD worlds solidly below this one. Hunchbackland is pretty middle of the road for me personally, but I always appreciated how it feels the freshest compared to literally everything else in Dream Drop. Completely new world and property, no returning characters, it's the only place in the entire game that fits that bill. Is it gonna live up to the grandiosity of the film? No, not even a little bit, but points for going somewhere kinda weird. And god, I know you can say this about basically every world, but I really love the tracks here, especially the field theme. Easily my favorite track in Dream Drop. I also think Riku got some decent character moments here, but Sora easily had the more fun half of the world to explore. In 54th place with 81 votes is another 0.2 area, the World Within. Mechanically, I do think it's the most interesting of the 0.2 offerings, but the one area left is stronger visually in my opinion. It's one of the more unique worlds in the series in terms of its structure. It's essentially this central nexus that branches off into a bunch of mini challenges ranging from combat to puzzles to exploration, and sometimes a synthesis of all three, Kupo. So for that reason it gets a big ol' regular pat seal of approval, which sure depreciates in value every financial quarter, but it at least looks very shiny. And Aqua's mirror version is a cool thematic avenue to explore Aqua's inner turmoil and self-doubt. Like, any world could have done that, but capitalizing on Dwarf Woodlands being home to the magic mirror makes this one of those perfect Disney KH integration moments. Next up, in 53rd place with 83 votes is KH2 Atlantica. Given that we've already knocked out a lot of conventional worlds from nearly every title, you KH2 Atlantica stands ought to be proud of your standing here. Do I personally like KH2 Atlantica more than KH1's? No, but I become less of a KH2 Atlantica hater with each passing day. Most, or at least some of the negativity stems from us being embarrassed to be caught dead playing this as kids. But cringe is like a flower or something, over time it blooms. Like, I am lurching toward my 30s and unashamedly still enjoying everything else around Atlantica, so what's the fucking difference at this point exactly? It's still not particularly fun to play, but the idea of it is charming. Like, hell yeah, sing those fucking songs, Sora, you do deserve more lines, Donald. I genuinely think if the button prompts were more frequent and varied, maybe even slightly difficult, then this world would not have the bad rap it traditionally gets. I'm not saying its reputation is even wholly undeserved, but I can at least nowadays squint and see the silhouette of the appeal here. Moving on to 52nd place with 84 votes is Beast Castle in Days. I've gotta say, I was really confused by this world's relatively high placement, and I triple-checked the results. Not that the world is terrible or even unmemorable, it's no mobile-verse Beast Castle, but I guess I'm just surprised that it's the favorite Disney world from Days. Worlds like Agrabah and Neverland added way more to their Days versions in the physical sense, whereas Beast Castle only gets the unremarkable upper level of the entrance hall. So it obviously isn't the world design that scored this world so many votes. And surely it wasn't the stealth-based gameplay that puts every Metal Gear game to shame. I know at least a few of you voted for it for the Roxas That's a Stick moment because some of you left notes about it. But I suppose the narrative stuff in Beast Castle was pretty strong. I always liked that scene of Roxas and Shion comparing Xemnas and Beast and what their quote-unquote servants' roles are in their respective castles. And in 51st place with 85 votes, I'm so proud of the GOAT for making it further than any other game in the video before losing a world, it's KH1 Monstro. At the same time, I'm fittingly gutted that Monstro is the least popular world, even if it's somewhat predictable. There's really only two other potential candidates for lowest KH1 world in my eyes, but those worlds have shooters, and Monstro really doesn't. I mean, I think it's neat, but I'm just one guy. Okay, my girlfriend actually used one of her votes on Monstro and I didn't, so I guess I'm a fake fan. Yes, Monstro is one of the shortest levels in the series, but it's dense, both in terms of world design and story content. I don't think it's the best in either of those fields, but underrated for sure. I've said this all before, but this is a KH original world with a Disney coat of paint, because it's all about the Sora and Riku drama, and I always found it so compelling. Sure, those chambers can be confusing to navigate, but pro tip, go in the green holes for progress. That sure is a sentence. In 50th place, with just 5 more votes than KH2 Atlantica, is KH1 Atlantica. And mind you, people did cheat for KH2 Atlantica, and I had to remove some votes, which would have made the difference in determining which Atlantica is superior. Yeah, to me, it's really no contest. I love the combat of both KH1 and 2 more than I could ever love any bargain bin rhythm game, so even if KH1 Atlantica literally waters down the combat formula, at least you're still getting a version of something that's generally really solid, even though you're surrounded by liquid. Now, I'm still not going to be the person to gas this world up, but I've also grown fonder of it as I've gotten older. Again, I'm both treading water and treading old ground here, but treating Atlantica as a world where you go all in on using magic makes for a less clunky experience. And I hate saying the C word about KH1, but if there's one place where it might fairly apply, it's probably Atlantica. But the KH1 devs, the absolute legends, decided, hey, if you don't like water levels, you literally don't have to play this one. You'll be missing out on some decent rewards, sure, but if you truly find underwater combat and exploration so appalling, you can just play Monstro in Halloween Town instead. I am assuming when people talk about accessibility in games, this is one of the primary examples we can point to. Alright, we have our penultimate tie here, won't see the last one for about 20 more entries, and the tie is between two radically different worlds. Two worlds scored 91 votes, one of them being our next Dream Drop world, Prankster's Paradise. Again, I am aghast. I'm perhaps even a Ghostabaki. You guys are letting two other DDD worlds skate right on by. Don't you understand that those ones were supposed to appear on the list first? Again, not like I'm Prankster's Paradise's loyalist diva, but have you no whimsy, no appreciation for a Ferris wheel, or the visage of friendly Randy? I think there is Monstro prejudice coming into play here because it does take up half of the world, but you know what? Monstro is physically cooler here than it was in KH1, and Sora's half of the world is really cool too. But I get that Pinocchio isn't exactly the most scintillating property, and it's some of the older news when it comes to the Dream Drop offerings. And yet, it feels wrong on a primal level that those other two chuckle fucks made it higher up the list, but we'll get there. Our other world with 91 votes is perhaps tonally the opposite of the Paradise. It's the world it never was in Days. I'm sure this goes for many of you, but when I hear 358 Days, I picture Roxas in the gray area. Even though it has the interior design of what I envision Purgatory to be like, there's something really nostalgic and comfy about this area. Like, that room takes me right back to middle school, for better or worse. Mostly worse. Outside of the escape sequence at the end of the game and like 2 optional missions, the gray area is really all there is to the world it never was in Days, but I think it's this high as a representative for the game as a whole. There's one more obviously higher world from Days still left, which carries both story significance and some actual level design, but you do physically spend a ton of time in this world, albeit in mainly one room. And much like Hollow Bastion in KH1 and 2, it's cool to have this world that was once the enemy stronghold in the prior game become your home base in the game that follows. Really epitomizes that whole another side, another story thing. Alright, back to single entries. In 47th place with 94 votes is the Country of the Musketeers. There you are, I was wondering where you'd been. Still kinda worried about what your brother is up to, but at least one of you is accounted for. I don't mean to be a hater. I mean, I do sometimes, but not at this exact moment, but I'm still so bewildered at this world existing. Especially bewildered at the true, actual prospect of it existing instead of other worlds. Like, maybe a world based on a steampunk space adventure from 2002? I don't know. I've talked ad nauseum about my gripes with Musketeers, but even outside of the choice, I just think the execution leaves a lot to be desired, especially on Sora's side. It's just kind of generic to me, and they didn't even adapt villainous Clarabelle for this world, which I think would have legitimately breathed a lot of life into things. Because I'm fairly certain this world made it this high thanks to fans of the movie, and the movie is fairly charming and actually funny. I wish that energy made it into its KH adaptation, but I suppose there's some novelty to a direct-to-video movie getting a world. I mean, it had happened with Return of Jafar already, but that was a sequel to an already existing world, so it felt a bit less wacky. Maybe they'll do something like this again, although I couldn't even begin to tell you what. Do they still even release things direct-to-video anymore? Is that even a thing? I feel so old. Oh god, there you are, in 46th place with 104 votes, somehow the 4th most popular Dream Drop world, it's the frickin' Grid! Aw yeah, who's ready to talk about the Grid? Yeah, it's the Grid! Can you guys just be honest with me? Are you trolling? Is this a prank on me? Am I that anti-Grid pill that I'm this blindsided by this degree of audience appreciation? I never see any of you talking about how cool this place is outside of this survey, so what gives? A lot of you left comments saying that you wanted to vote for the Grid as a joke but decided against it, and I didn't even detect any attempted rigging for the Grid either. People who did end up voting for it often left comments about enjoying Tron Legacy and telling me I should really give it a chance. Well, I did give it a chance back when I ranked the DDD worlds last year. It was whatever. Daft Punk is powerful, but not that powerful. Clearly the aesthetics of worlds like the Grid and Space Paranoids are polarizing, and I'm at a different pole than many of you. I'm glad you all like it, but for me it's my least favorite world out of the quote-unquote main titles, and it's not particularly close. I give it a leg up over Musketeers for having some decent character moments and KH original integration, but everything else makes me want to Control-Alt-Delete myself. Back to Culture, in 45th place with 105 votes, is our most popular 0.2 area, Castletown, based on Castle of Dreams from Birth by Sleep. Definitely my favorite area in the game. I remember being especially wowed by this place when I first played 0.2, and it got me so excited for what the worlds would feel like in KH3. Outside of the late game stuff, KH3 never takes on quite as dark of a tone as, well, the entirety of 0.2, but I always found that stuff like Castletown was a good sampler for the more open and layered level design that we get for most of KH3. It's nothing crazy in the grand scheme of game design, but I really enjoyed something as simple as having to find all those gears scattered around the area in order to proceed. Like, make me look around and explore and jump on stuff. I am begging these worlds to let me engage with them and spend time in them beyond just traveling from point A to B. Next up, with 106 votes in 44th place, is the BBS Keyblade Graveyard. Kinda funny that the Graveyard got 44th, in some cultures that's the death number twice in a row. What's not funny is the absolute trauma buffet that gets served up here, but it sure does make for some compelling video gaming. The Graveyard is never the zaniest, most fun place to explore in any of its incarnations, but it pretty much always delivers on story moments and impactful boss fights. I ranked Birth by Sleep's Graveyard in about the middle of the pack when reviewing BBS's worlds, which is similar to what the voters did. I do prefer a bit more exploration in my final KH world, or just raw time spent in it, neither of which you really get with the BBS Graveyard. But getting to play out that KH2 secret ending armed with the context that brought all these characters to this point, it was something really special then, and it still kinda gives me goosebumps now. It's like a really dark form of catharsis. You know everything is pretty much doomed, but you're still excited to turn that page so you can finally see how it all goes to shit. All in all, I think this is a fair placement. And in 43rd place, with 107 votes, another BBS world, Deep Space. I'm actually pretty surprised to see this one beat out a handful of things we've already covered, only because a lot of people tend to hold the lack of Lilo against the Lilo and Stitch world. It's me, I'm people. I just think the space stuff in Lilo and Stitch is easily the least interesting and iconic stuff from the property, and, you know, that's all you get in this world. But what it lacks in Hawaii, it makes up for in some pretty solidly designed areas, and especially great scenes with the Wayfinders and Experiment 626. I don't know how long Kingdom Hearts will go on, for how many years or games, but when this shit ends, I need at least a 10-second scene of Stitch and Ven together again. I don't care if either of them are in the final installment, I demand a total non sequitur if necessary. You can put it right after the credits roll for all I care. And the alien's tentacle paw curls, and we get the live-action Stitch instead. Gotta be more careful about how I word these things. Moving on to 42nd place with 109 votes, yet another Birth by Sleep world, Enchanted Dominion. Yeah, this place is just a vibe. To be honest, its world design is pretty hallway-esque. It's really only like 2 rooms in Maleficent's castle that have any meat to them whatsoever, and you don't even get to go there as Terra. But as someone who played as Terra first and thus went here for my first proper BBS level, I feel like it did an immaculate job at setting the tone for the game. Even though it's only 10 years removed from KH1, Birth by Sleep always had that hazy, detached, almost mythical feeling to it, like you're seeing something you're not supposed to see. And Enchanted Dominion just encapsulates that feeling for me. It's so moody and lonely. And at least here, the complete lack of population is somewhat explained by Flora having cast a spell to put everyone to sleep. Unlike Olympus Coliseum in this game, where you can witness all those cheering fans in their non-existent glory. Also, the Silent Forest is like a top 10 track for me in the series. Once again, it truly captures that mystifying, sleepy feeling that I think sort of permeates throughout the entire game. Up next, in 41st place with 110 votes, it's Port Royal from KH2. Personally, I'd have it above like 1 or 2 more KH2 worlds, but this feels just about right, all things considered. While the world is visually kinda blah and its environments aren't super interesting, I can definitely appreciate the route it took with how these different areas are accessed through the ship map. And I always thought that, while sometimes annoying, the gimmick with the undead pirates only being damageable in the moonlight is some great story and gameplay integration. I try to cut this world a bit of slack because it was the first time Kingdom Hearts attempted to adapt a live-action property. I mean, it adapts Tron simultaneously, but this is the first one we see, obviously. Things clearly don't feel as natural and believable as they do in KH3 Caribbean, but it was an effort. I'll also shout out both the Barbossa and Grim Reaper 2 fights. I think they're both pretty creative. Minus losing the fight if Jack dies in the Barbossa battle, fuck that. Jumping up another 10 votes, in 40th place with 120 votes is another pirate world, KH1 Neverland. I think people really sleep on this place, although I get it's hard to be super excited about a bunch of visually similar brown rooms in a pirate ship that is very much not actually Neverland proper. But it was always so exciting to me for the world to be like physically en route to what you think is the last world in the game. Everything's building up to that crescendo, and shit really starts to hit the fan here, between Anti-Sora, Riku snatching Kairi away, Hook just casually mentioning Hollow Bastion despite being a Disney character, fulfilling the back of the game case prophecy and getting to finally fly. It's all so good. It no doubt would have scored higher if it had some more substantial environments, but I actually don't think I'd be as fond of the world if it did. There's something about the cramped, claustrophobic, oppressive atmosphere that makes this world feel unique. KH1 in general is a lot tighter and more contained with its level design than every other game in the series, but it's especially felt in these Jolly Roger cabins and corridors, and oddly enough, I think there's just something special about it. And we take our biggest jump in votes so far up to 163 for 39th place, 100 Acre Wood in KH1. Even as a KH1 truther, I can admit that the KH2 version is generally more fun, at least as far as its minigames go. But this first outing to the woods wasn't bad, even if I guess it's, by process of elimination, my least favorite KH1 world. A highlight for me is the bouncing spot area, not so much for its minigames, but for having little platforming and item collecting bits that you don't really get in any of the other appearances of the wood. Fuck James Woods, by the way. Oh no, I watched this far and now we had to ruin it. Unfortunately, the KH1 minigames range from middling to really bad, but at least we get the start of Sora's friendship with Pooh here, which remains one of my favorite relationships between a KH original character and a Disney one. And I guess this speaks more so to KH1 than 100 Acre Wood itself, but finding the torn pages scattered around the world and gradually piecing them back into the book is a really satisfying and, frankly, emotionally manipulative side quest. Next up, with 169 votes in 38th place, it's the Pride Lands. I am actually surprised it did this well, but I'm probably a bit more apathetic about the Pride Lands than many fans. I'm a basic bitch from 1996, so I love The Lion King, and I was let down pretty much immediately by the Pride Lands on first playthrough. Once the novelty of Lion Sora wears off, and it's admittedly some pretty strong novelty, I was left wanting a lot out of the world itself. Scar is given like nothing to do, Simba is a sad sack for nearly the entirety of your visits, and you spend an inordinate amount of time chasing around hyenas. And I get that the environment has to be primarily dead and desolate given when in the story the world is set, but I wish the place could have livened up a bit between the first and second visits. The only color in this world is found in the two generic jungle areas. When I hear Lion King, I think of extremely vibrant and colorful sequences like I Just Can't Wait to Be King or Hakuna Matata. You don't really get any of that in the Pride Lands, instead I'm singing I Just Can't Wait to Get Lion Pete off my screen. Back to KH1 here, with 170 votes in 37th place is the OG Agrabah, and absolutely the best of the Agrabahs, so good job everyone. Like KH2's Agrabah, I have KH1's right around the middle of the pack in its game, but I think it has way higher highs. It's essentially the end of Act 1 of the game, and it's sort of like Neverland in that you can feel the stakes building as you play through this world, especially in its final moments. Maleficent's lieutenant and Jafar getting taken off the board, Jasmine getting kidnapped, finding out Riku is the kidnapper in question, it's exciting stuff that got me motivated to press on to the next chunk of the game. And I know platforming is controversial amongst the broader fanbase, but I've always loved it, and I think it's especially fun in Agrabah, both throughout the city and in the Cave of Wonders. The Cave of Wonders is so cool. Basically entirely invented for the game, and just the right amount of puzzle elements, platforming, and combat. It's a shame it's all capped off, or crapped off even, with the Genie Jafar fight, my least favorite thing to do, and I have had root canals. I got bad teeth. In 36th place, with 176 votes, is the Cage 2 version of 100 Acre Wood. Like I said earlier, I do think Cage 2's Wood has the best minigames, and while it lacks the physicality of the first game's iteration, I think those improved minigames and the expanded cast of characters make this my preferred version of the world. I somehow didn't really notice as a kid, but the only characters who have voiced lines in the Cage 1 version are Pooh, Piglet, and Tigger. This time everyone's voiced, so if you're just generally a fan of the Winnie the Pooh franchise, this makes perfect sense as the definitive Pooh experience. Like me after eating too much dairy. Once again, collecting the torn pages across the worlds is a fun side quest, and one that's easy to get emotionally invested in considering Pooh fucking forgot about you, and this is the only way you can jumpstart the little bastard's brain. And I really do think this world has some of the series' most fun and satisfying minigames. I had that Honey Slider game at like 2nd overall when I ranked every minigame in the franchise. Really sad that we went from that to 3 Candy Crush clones. And in 35th place, with 180 votes, it's the most popular Union Cross world, who would have thought, Daybreak Town. For what it's worth, it's got a cozy feeling to it, like even I, someone who really does not care for the gameplay stylings of Union Cross, feel a twinge of nostalgia and comfort when I hear Before the Daylight. Once again, it might be that toxic relationship I described when talking about Union Cross Agrabah, because in reality, this was just the morsel of Cage content I was able to get during most of my college years, and the whole experience was lathered in gotcha bullshit. But these home-based type worlds tend to be popular, and Daybreak Town is no exception, even despite being from a mobile game. Sure, it's still just a little under 200 votes, but the fact that it managed to beat a bunch of worlds from, you know, legitimate games is a testament to how terrifying the Union Cross section of the fanbase is. I'm only mostly kidding. Daybreak Town is also unique in that it's a place that you can't really exist in at this current moment. All of these other worlds you can pop in a disc or cartridge and go there, but Daybreak Town is more of a you had to be there moment. And it's a cool place to its credit. It's a rare pre-Cage 3 location where you can actually believe all of the houses and buildings in it are lived in, given the horde of PNG characters that exist in Union Cross. Back to 3 dimensions and staying there for the rest of the video, in 34th place with 183 votes, it's the DDD version of The World That Never Was. Well audience, our Dream Drop world order has differed dramatically up until this point, but I too have this as my 3rd favorite world from that game. This is a rare occasion in Dream Drop where I feel like the level design and the world's layout is actually a strong suit. Obviously, we get a ton of, some might even say too many, plot revelations here, and that's all fine and good, or less than those things, but I'm higher on this world for its physicality. It feels fittingly climactic for both Sora and Riku's sides, with Riku making his way up a remixed version of the castle that never was, and Sora's path finally showing us more of the Dark City, which was criminally underused in Cage 2. Frankly, it still feels pretty underexplained, like why is there a desolate metropolis here, but I don't think Dream Drop was ever really going to delve into that if Cage 2 never did. But yeah, pretty solid ending gauntlets for both campaigns, especially relative to the rest of the game, which I always felt defeated itself at every turn thanks to flow motion. I had to harp on it at least once. Honestly, I'd like this place even more if it wasn't to funnel into that bullshit-ass young Xehanort fight. God, I hate that twerp. With 184 votes, and in 33rd place, is San Francisco. I think I liked San Fran a lot more when Cage 3 first came out, even as someone who hadn't seen Big Hero 6 until about a year later. Nowadays, it's just kinda there for me. When comparing it to the traditionally last Disney worlds in the previous games, I don't feel like it really stacks up compared to Neverland or Space Paranoids, at least in the story department. As far as environments go, it's the most engaging of the 3, but I feel like it's just big for the sake of being big. The Caribbean is the other example of a relatively open-world-esque level in this game, and it looks like you all agree with me that it did this concept better. San Francisco has all these streets and buildings, but not a whole lot to do with them, so the exploration ends up feeling kinda hollow to me. It doesn't help that despite its openness, the story visit has you getting funneled through mission-type goals while Hero yaps in your ear that you're going the wrong way or taking too long. I led negative here, but I still think the world is visually stunning, and it's still fun to run up walls and air step and glide all over the place. And I think Flash Tracer is rad as hell. I just wish there were more to do here besides hunting for treasure chests once the story visit is over. but I'll hear no Baymax slander, he is a highlight of the world for me. And increasing by just 1 vote yet again, in 32nd place with 185 votes, we've got Olympus Coliseum in KH2. This is actually one of my favorite KH2 worlds, mainly due to how much is packed into it, especially the first visit. The world itself is actually kinda bland and samey in my opinion, which is hard to avoid when you set 90% of it in the underworld, but it's at least cool to get to see that part of the movie represented. And even if I'm not particularly wowed by how the world looks, it's still laid out in a more interesting way than many KH2 worlds, with how it's got this center area at the underworld entrance that branches off into 2 separate halves of the world. And it doesn't matter if that mainly consists of a bunch of foggy gray corridors, because you can travel those corridors with the baddest motherfucker in video games, Orin last name. 4 of you included Orin as your reasoning for voting for Olympus Coliseum, and I couldn't agree more. If you don't stop me with physical force, I will talk about how good the Orin integration is until forever. This world also gives us one of my favorite Disney bosses of all time, the Hydra, plus you get some organization meddling, some Pete bullshit, it's KH2 firing on almost all cylinders. And falling just short of the top 30, in 31st place with 193 votes is Twilight Town in Days, making it the most popular world from that game. I can't really imagine a ton of people voting for this based on the world's physical qualities, considering it's just a smaller, more pixelated version of the KH2 world. Instead, I assume this world did this well based on its emotional, story-based merits, which I can totally understand. Some of the best, and frankly most natural-sounding conversations across the franchise take place on that precarious clock tower ledge, so I wouldn't blame anyone for voting for Days Twilight Town just based on that alone. And, you know, even though Days came out after KH2, its version of Twilight Town still has its own unique nostalgic quality to it, and I think that can actually be chalked up to its visuals. PJ and I discussed this a bit on our new podcast called No Sad Face, which, if you weren't aware of that, check it out in the description. The Days episode hopefully isn't up before this video, but because of the DS's limitations, and because this game is trying to adapt worlds and models that originally appeared in PS2 games, the visuals of Days can come off as something that's more PS1 adjacent, and that graphical style in particular evokes a lot of nostalgia from me, though I can't speak for everyone. That reading probably doesn't hit for people that never grew up with PS1 era games in the first place, but it might be an explanation for us geriatrics who feel a special kind of twinge when looking at and listening to the sights and sounds of Days Twilight Town. Moving on to 30th place with 203 votes is the most popular Disney world in Birth by Sleep, Neverland. Yeah, in my mind it was really only ever a contest between this and Enchanted Dominion, and the votes reflect that. It also wasn't particularly close since they're separated by almost 100 votes. It's hard not to like Neverland in this game because it's something of a redemption moment for the physically limited version of the world in quotes that we got in KH1. But like its KH1 predecessor, this Neverland also carries a slight sense of dread and anticipation as the game ramps up to its conclusion. And this time we're armed with dramatic irony that informs us that things are going to be kinda, sorta, not okay. This is especially exemplified by the confrontation with Vanitas during Aqua's campaign, which is jarring in the best Kingdom Hearts kind of way in that it takes place against an inappropriately cheery backdrop. Neverland's also got some of the best level design in the game, Captain Hook stealing every scene he shows up in, and unsurprisingly some excellent field and battle themes. Somehow Neverland has 6 unique themes, 7 if you count the clock tower music from KH1, but I'm not complaining. Anyway, remember that Ven and Stitch scene that I demanded a while back? I would like to amend that the post-credits should also include a scene of Peter Pan flying around with, at minimum, Sora, Kairi, Terra, Aqua, and Ven. Peter is an airborne green prick, but I think he's expecting a lot of people to show back up someday, and I hope they make good on that. In 29th place, with 209 votes, is another version of Twilight Town, this time the one from KH3. So it got 16 more votes than the Days version, which is, I think, pretty damning. Not unexpected, in fact I'm surprised it did this well, but it goes to show that this place has a ton of unrealized potential. I never really got the story on KH3 Twilight Town, if there's even one out there, but I wonder if it was rushed together or if this was an intentional choice. It's beautiful, packed to the brim with charm and detail and a real feeling of liveliness, but it's also, you know, small. Sometimes less is more, but I don't know, a little bit more than less could have been cool. I mean, they thankfully KH3ified the best and most interesting part of the town, but surely they could have found a way to breathe new life into other areas like Station Heights or the Sandlot. Maybe they couldn't or didn't want to figure out how to naturally connect all the areas without loading screens and room transitions, but I feel like people still would have preferred a bigger but more segmented experience over a really small one. Still, it's a testament to this world's charm that it did score this highly because it beat so many worlds that are like inarguably more fully realized. And forgive me for not spending too much time on KH3 worlds today because I don't want to just end up repeating all of this for my eventual KH3 world ranking, but this sliver of Twilight Town still has a lot to love. namely the bistro, the little movie projector area, the inclusion and introduction of lucky emblems, and most importantly, the Hainer Hey Loser kick. Next up, with 210 votes in 28th place from one small world to another, it's the original Olympus Coliseum from KH1. I'm actually surprised it beat out KH2 Olympus because it's a rare occasion where I might actually prefer a KH2 version of a world that also appears in KH1. It's probably just this and 100 Acre Wood. Now, don't get me wrong, I still quite like KH1 Olympus, and I vastly prefer its tournaments, which are the entirety of its combat offerings, unlike KH2. It's kind of weird how Olympus in KH1 is an optional world, because I feel like it's actually pretty core to the story of Sora's journey in that game, but you technically never have to go here. But it makes sense that of that first circuit of Disney worlds, this is the non-mandatory one, because they didn't exactly have a lot on tap when it came to exploration and big set pieces. And yet, as a kid, I had no concept whatsoever of Olympus being skippable, so this was very much quintessential KH1 in my eyes. Sora learning what it means to be a hero is a through line that runs roughly concurrently with the game's message about friendship and where power comes from, and it's especially cool how KH2 and 3 continue to run with this thread. So despite Olympus being optional, I think it's really one of the most narratively necessary worlds in the game. Also, Cloud is here and he gets stepped on by Cerberus. With that, we arrive at our final tie on the list. Two worlds received 212 votes, the first of which is Radiant Garden from Birth by Sleep, unsurprisingly making it the most popular BBS world. And I'm surely biased because it's at the top of my own BBS world rankings, but I think this is ultimately too low. I personally would have had it above at least another 5 or 6 worlds, including locations from numbered titles. I'm absolutely obsessed with the visit to Radiant Garden across all 3 campaigns. If you're heading to this place in the middle of its respective game, expect to strike gold. They cranked the fan service dial up to 13, and I unashamedly enjoyed every second of it. Braig showing up in Terra's story, young Kairi and Aqua's, and my favorite scene in the series in which Ven meets a young Lee and Isa. All of this stuff is Birth by Sleep delivering on its premise of being a game set 10 years prior to KH1, and it all made me shout obscenities at my PlayStation Portable, in a good way. I also just loved getting to see what Radiant Garden at the height of its powers actually looked like, because prior to BBS we just had stories of the glory days or depictions of the city being rebuilt. But this is a nation in its prime, serving as the capital of the Kingdom Hearts universe. I wish we could have seen some people walking around and doing stuff, but that goes for pretty much every BBS and Dream Drop world. The technology wasn't really there for bustling KH3 Twilight Town-esque environments, but I'd love to see a version of this world with an actual population. It's also got some solid TVA stuff, which the bar is admittedly low for, but it was nice to see all 3 of them be on screen at the same time and, you know, interacting. I could take or leave having to fight the Trinity armor 3 times, but I suppose that just comes with the territory of a game like BBS. And Radiant Garden is tied with a practical inverse world, a backwater place that King Mickey would never be caught dead in, Deep Jungle. And even my feelings about its placement are inverted because I actually cannot believe it scored this high. Not because I dislike Deep Jungle, but because I had assumed everyone else did. I feel like I never see anyone talking good about this place, so to see it just outside the top 25 is a shock to me. Almost any discourse I see regarding Deep Jungle, and to a lesser extent KH1 in general, is that it's confusing to navigate and that players often find themselves getting lost without a clue of where to go next. Which, I resent all of that, you just need to pay attention to cutscenes and explore, but I digress. Maybe the 212 voters saw what I see in Deep Jungle, which is the sense of adventure that this world imparts like almost no other. By KH1 standards, it's absolutely massive, and probably the Disney world you're likely to spend the most time in on your first visit. It was also the first time in the game where I, playing it as a child, could point at the screen and go, oh, I remember that from the movie. I had never seen Alice in Wonderland, otherwise it probably would have happened there. Even still, I think Deep Jungle did an especially good job at adapting locations like the treehouse and the camp. You also get your first non-Donald and Goofy party member here, you get to fight a Disney villain beyond just smacking the Queen of Hearts and exposing her bloomers, so I'm glad you all recognize Deep Jungle as the iconic world that it truly is. With no more ties left, we now enter our definitive top 25 most popular Kingdom Hearts worlds, starting with KH3's Keyblade Graveyard. Obviously, it's scored lower than the quote-unquote last levels in the other numbered titles, but KH3 has 3 last levels, and one of them is called the last level, so the votes definitely get divided up a bit there. I hope the lower count for the graveyard here doesn't distract from the fact that this world is like a pop-off pyramid, it just builds and builds upon itself. You'll watch a cutscene and be like, fuck yeah, what a cool moment, that's the cherry on top of this scene, but then they put a bowl on top of that cherry and scoop some ice cream into it and start adding toppings and you're like, holy shit, am I allowed to eat this? This is about to be a definitive poo experience. I know some people have qualms with KH3's ending gauntlet or just how KH3 in general is set up, but I am not one of those guys. This is like one of the least safe places on the internet for you to tell me about the game being disappointing. It's that meme of someone saying the literal coolest thing ever actually fucking sucks. I don't mind being easy to please, I'm a cheap date. The one thing I can complain about with KH3's Graveyard is the fact that it's a graveyard, so you're not getting like any environmental explory stuff that KH3 had largely excelled at up until that point. They sort of shrugged out some very quick and basic puzzles in some of the labyrinth's corridors, but even calling the place a labyrinth feels pretty generous. They should have had Larxene design the place with her stone and earth powers that she has. And from endings to beginnings, with 224 votes at 24th place is the start of it all, the KH1 Dive to the Heart. I'm actually really surprised that enough people cared about it to spend this many votes on it, but the place does make a hell of a first impression. This was my introduction to not just Kingdom Hearts, but the entire action RPG genre. It's also probably like the second or third game I played on the PS2, I can only think of Pac-Man World 2 as a predecessor. But this shit was way different than that smiley yellow ball. This wasn't your average everyday children's video game. This was advanced children's video game. I don't know if it's because I'm old or an asshole or both, but I think people making media primarily for kids should continue to put things in there that might scare the little fuckers. Children need to reckon with a dark side adjacent figure before the age of 7. It builds character. Like, if this whole opening sequence was the usual sunshine and rainbows that I got from every other facet of my kid life, I doubt I would have been as fascinated and, frankly, obsessed with Kingdom Hearts for the rest of my existence to follow. I wouldn't call it a morbid curiosity, but I was, like, kinda scared. I wanted someone around while I played it because it just felt kinda sinister and powerful. I know that might seem weird to someone who first engaged with the game as an adult, but the Dive to the Heart just sets an underlying tone of tension and uncertainty. That washes away a bit once Sora wakes up on Destiny Islands, but the game continues to sucker punch you with things like Ansem in the Secret Place or the fucking Apocalypse. But it's also memorable for it. I just love the opening few hours of KH1, and the Dive to the Heart does an immaculate job at setting the tone for the adventure that follows. And from endings to beginnings back to endings, with 255 votes in 23rd place is the final world from KH3. How fitting that these two places appear back to back given their extremely close proximity in Kingdom Hearts metaphysics. And it's basically a bookend to how the entire saga started, extremely unsettling and weird. The final world and Scala combo sent me right back to feeling like an apprehensive grade schooler, and mind you, I played KH3 as a senior in college. Fuck. But once again, it felt like seeing something I wasn't supposed to see, and for a game to make me feel that way in my 20s is something special. There may be final world detractors who say, come on, it's just 2 rooms. But you have to admit those 2 rooms are cracked out of their skulls. You were having a big ol' guffaw over 2 Baymaxes about an hour ago, and now these incorporeal star souls are telling you about how they fucking died, and how they feel about that. Some of them are kids. But from minute 1 of this series, they have always excelled at juxtaposing the safe and familiar with the scary and unknown, and look at that, they stuck the landing yet again. This is all independent of one of my favorite sequences in the game, the Sora Collectathon, which I low-key hoped would get like an expanded version in Remind because I truly love using my movement abilities to navigate this fucked up sodium Rubik's Cube. It's not often that any problems at all, especially post-KH1, are solved by doing something other than beating the shit out of tiny monsters, so this is a welcome change of pace that really puts a button on the oddity that is the final world experience. Moving on to 22nd place with 257 votes, another KH3 world, Monstropolis. I personally think Monstropolis is solid, but parts of it are a mixed bag. I enjoyed it fine enough in the moment, but it kinda reminds me of Pride Lands. In my head, the source material is so vibrant, and in the case of Monsters Inc., zany, but I didn't feel like that energy fully translated to the world adaptation. There are so many fun and creative monster designs, but we don't get to see any of them outside of a handful of main characters. This is obviously by virtue of the world being set at night, so everyone is conveniently out of the factory. It makes sense for the story they're trying to tell, but it's kind of a bummer that we don't see any funguses or George Sanders plotting around. Imagine a San Francisco level of NPC population in Monstropolis. I'm sure the devs imagined it too and said, fuck that, that sounds expensive. And while the factory is a unique type of environment for the series, I just don't know if it made for the most fun place to explore. Save for the door vault, which was a given, and they did just about as well as they could have with it. But I don't know, maybe it could have been fun to go through some of the doors themselves, even if just in a scripted sequence. Maybe that muddies things by going to worlds within worlds, but we've done it before, including in this game. You know, to play Candy Crush. My other qualm is the music, actually, and make no mistake, I would fight an entire small nation if it looked at Yoko Shimomura the wrong way, but the tracks here aren't doing a ton for me. Once again, I think I associate Monstropolis with the jazzy, upbeat tune that we get in the opening cutscene, but that disappears in favor of the more industrious-sounding field and battle themes. But I still like a lot about Monstropolis. Mike and Sully are extremely fun party members, and the way this world works in tandem with the Vanita stuff is like A+++ Kingdom Hearts. Counterpoint, however, let me hit Randall with a baseball bat. Up next, in 21st place with 258 votes, is the most popular world from Chain of Memories, Castle Oblivion. What a coincidence that it ended up right next to Monstropolis. That world had a factory that used to make kids cry, and Castle Oblivion also used to make kids cry. As in me, trying to beat Riku Goddamn Replica 4. CO is obviously a bit of a special case when it comes to Chain of Memories because it's both the 13th floor, but also the overall encompassing world space of the entire game. I doubt many people were voting for the last floor in either Sora or Riku's story, and instead for the whole Castle Oblivion experience. Which, yeah, it's a fucking gnarly experience. I could go on and on about how much I love Chain of Memories and its oppressive, claustrophobic vibe. It's excellent. It's also a rare case of, in my opinion, the lack of complex world design actually working in the game's favor. This place needs to feel sterile, direct, and no nonsense for it to get across the right tone. Every room looking identical to one a floor prior or after is perfectly unnerving. This may have been a direction taken out of necessity instead of choice thanks to the hardware being worked with, but it pays off nonetheless. The only thing that fills these walls are projections created by false memories. It's like you're trapped in a dentist's office waiting room and you're also really, really high. I think to speak any more about Castle Oblivion would just be me talking about the entire game and the strength of its story and characters, which I have already done a bunch, so you can check out an ancient video for my thoughts on it, which still stand. Entering the top 20, we take our biggest jump in votes so far. With 305 votes in 20th place, it's Space Paranoids. So I've talked about this world like a billion times, and I guess this makes a billion and one. As a kid, I didn't care for Space Paranoids at all, didn't recognize the property, didn't like the aesthetic, found it to be a buzzkill during the middle visit to Hollow Bastion. But over time, I started to appreciate it a lot more. The 80s neon color palette became sort of grotesquely charming, and the way this world ties into the external KH original universe is practically unheard of when compared to nearly every other Disney world in the series. The closest example is probably the Vanita stuff in Monstropolis that we just touched on. And Tron has always been a cool guy, he throws himself into data holes and doesn't afraid of anything. I still don't think this world is especially fun to explore because it's actually quite small, but that's pretty much par for the course with this game in particular. At least it's got some memorable set pieces and moments like the Light Cycle or the Solar Sailor. Sark and the MCP are also a unique boss fight, and the first time in the series that you fight against a married couple, besides Clegan and his big lizard, of course. In 19th place with 327 votes, another KH2 world, Beast Castle. Overall, I'm surprised at how well the two non-mobile Beast Castles did, but I guess it makes up for how especially badly the phone versions performed. It might be because I was never a huge Beauty and the Beast fan, so as a kid I found the property a bit less exciting than something like Mulan or Hercules on either side of it. But once again, using the power of hindsight only gained by being a member of the AARP, Beast Castle has risen in my estimation. Once again, not so much for the aesthetics and environment, though I do appreciate the moody French castle a bit more than what it looks like if a rainbow runs into traffic. But Beast Castle excels in an area where a lot of KH2 worlds fall short for me, and that's the area of making it feel like anything that's worth a shit is happening in these Disney worlds. It's not on that same level as Space Paranoids or Monstropolis, but the Beast and Zaldin stuff is at least somewhat compelling. I know what we're witnessing is mainly just an unhealthy and unrequited obsession, but it's more than can be said of what goes on in Agrabah or Pride Lands, which is nothing. The fact that Zaldin was even legally permitted to die on the Beast Castle bridge is still mind-boggling. Isn't there some rule that you're not allowed to be proclaimed dead while on Disney World property? I mean, Beast Castle is a Disney World. Maybe it doesn't count if you're a nobody. Which, racist, frankly. And in 18th place with 358 votes, yet another KH2 world, Halloween Town. It's a real tug-of-war for me with Halloween Town because it is the hallway of KH2. There is just nothing going on in terms of world design or exploration, and for things to be that way in a property as unique as The Nightmare Before Christmas feels like such a shame. Especially because we finally get the actual Christmas part in this game, and it's reduced to some really unremarkable areas, half of which are just rooms in Santa's workshop. But on the other side of the tug-of-war, the source material is so fun and whimsical, and I'm a ride-or-die holly jolly Christmas slut, so I still end up having a fine enough time here. And do you youngsters realize that when we first played KH2, we didn't even get Christmas outfits? And that the Halloween music played while you were running around Candy Cane Lane? We lived like animals. When people talk about Final Mix, they tend to focus on the data battles, the new cutscenes, limit form, but they almost never talk about how Nomura saved Christmas. This was the most lifted of the Final Mix faces. On top of all of that, you've also got some great bosses in this world, namely Oogie Boogie, which I understand I'm probably a bigger fan of than most, but more notably the Experiment. The latter less so for the fight itself, but for the story and tragic implications behind its existence. It's a fittingly creepy, fucked up little guy for Halloween Town Heartless, or not Heartless depending on which wiki editor you ask. Moving away from KH2 for a bit, in 17th place with 374 votes, we have the most popular Olympus, the KH3 iteration. Yeah, hard to argue against this being like the definitive Hercules world. Sure, you don't get any underworld stuff this go around, but this version of Olympus is most similar to the mind picture that my brain paints up when I hear Hercules. Especially the realm of the gods, which like we ostensibly were walking around in as early as KH1, but I never really fully understood that. Like, it's depicted as being in the sky, but then why exactly is Phil up there? Is Zeus cool with Hades and Cerberus just wrecking shit in his domain? Or was that some kind of in-between area, not quite Olympus, not quite Thebes? Which, speaking of, it was nice to finally explore the place itself and not just the town near it. Olympus is essentially a world of 3 distinct parts, and all 3 are equally solid in my opinion. The entire climb up Mount Olympus is some great vertical level design, not something you get a ton of in Kingdom Hearts, and I especially love that there's different options on how exactly you scale it the first time through. It's kind of bizarre how Olympus serves as a sort of de facto tutorial world. It's almost as if you were supposed to get to play as Sora at the end of 0.2 and do all of this before 3 proper actually started. But I do think it was a good choice to set up Sora's search for the power of waking, which I know some people have qualms with. I really don't, because it's just about as nebulous as searching every world you find in the hopes that your friends happen to be hanging out there. I'd say my most major Olympus complaint is still that there's no cups, not just because it's tradition in the numbered titles, but because it's like they were taunting us by putting a big fucking arena-looking thing behind Zeus at the peak of the realm, and then just plopping a battle gate in there. Thankfully, some talented fans have modded a proper Coliseum into the game. Next up, we've got a KH1 world here in 16th place with 392 votes, Wonderland, which was, for many of us, our first Disney World. And I've gotta say, this surprises me, not to the same extent as Deep Jungle's relatively deep run, but I also feel like Wonderland is either maligned or just considered kinda meh. But I'm pleasantly surprised because if we're talking just strictly world design, Wonderland is one of the best in the series, and you could make a very real argument that things peak extremely early in that respect. The crazy thing is that the world is technically only 5 rooms, but the Bazaar room serves as this absurdity nexus, and it hides secrets that I didn't find until literally 17 years after the game came out. In retrospect, the world probably doesn't do a great job at representing even half of what Alice in Wonderland has to offer, like it's missing arguably the most iconic characters, and outside of the Bazaar room, the world isn't that, well, bizarre. You spend a big chunk of your time in the Lotus Forest and Queen's Court as well, so this world also kind of feels like your obligatory grassy, woodsy starter world, but with a twist. That all being said, I had no familiarity with the movie, and thus nothing to really compare it to, so it didn't disappoint my kid self when I first played through. I'll also concede that it's a bit of a head-scratcher pick just when solely thinking about selling the player on the premise of Kingdom Hearts, given that this is the world they want you to visit first. When thinking about what people would have been hyped for in 2002, I think the only less exciting property as your first Disney World is like Pinocchio. But I still think starting with Wonderland serves the story well, since it illustrates to Sora and the player that all bets are off. Destiny Islands was Kansas, and this Disney business is a whole bunch of Oz. Once again, we have our biggest jump in votes so far, a 56 vote difference between 16th and 15th place, with 448 votes, The Kingdom of Corona. So, Tangled is another movie I hadn't seen prior to KH3. In hindsight, I should have studied more for a game I knew was coming out for several years. But despite knowing basically nothing about Tangled, I found myself really enjoying Corona, way more than the time I got it on an airplane. I also went to Corona before Toy Box, despite the latter having a lower battle level. I think I got the markers mixed up when flying the gummy ship and was like, oh, well, I guess I'll go here. My positive first impression of the world may be partially credited to not knowing how much of the movie plot they were rehashing. I wouldn't say it's quite on the level of the Caribbean or Arendelle, but they're definitely pulling scenes directly from the movie, but I didn't know that at the time. Although you can kinda tell when you get something like the lantern scene where SDG aren't present that this was basically copy-pasted. But the trio felt like more of an active force in this world compared to those other examples, and the optional little moments between Sora and Rapunzel on the way to the kingdom are excellent, and something I wish the game did more of in other worlds. I actually end up believing a friendship between them at the end of the world, whereas I don't think Elsa remembers Sora's name 2 minutes after they leave Arendelle. Corona gets some flack for being more linear than any other world in the game, but I think it serves the world well. Because it is linear, but it's also long, so it feels like an actual journey from the tower to the kingdom. I always had the same thoughts and defense for Final Fantasy X. It's very much A to B to C, but it just makes sense for that game's story and setup. Also, the Grim Guardianess is still one of my favorite bosses in the game. I love its attack variety and how it's set in such an unconventional arena. And we yet again take our biggest leap in votes. In 14th place with 546 votes, we've got Dream Drop Distance Traverse Town. This is my personal favorite world in the game, but I kinda knew it wasn't gonna take the top spot with the audience. It's probably no surprise that I'm very fond of the original Traverse Town, so this remix version of it really struck a chord with me. It's like the 10-year anniversary of the town's founding. It feels like there's just this general spirit of festivity and celebration in the air, especially in those new districts. I've also been on the record a few times now talking about how I feel like flow motion works pretty well here too, and doesn't really cheapen what the world design has to offer. The post office mailroom in particular is one of my favorite rooms in the game, and such a creative expansion of a minor but memorable object from the first game. Doesn't it look so stupid? Who dressed it like that? Also, given how well The World Ends With You cast performed in the character survey, I suppose it's entirely possible Dream Drop Traverse Town was assisted with the Tooie bump. At least 14 of you explicitly mentioned it in your voting notes. I think you should be able to leave notes when you vote for real people, by the way. Even if no one's gonna read them, I want the option. But the Tooie characters are fun here, as someone who didn't know anything of them prior to playing Dream Drop. Definitely fills the void of Final Fantasy representation that takes a nosedive after KH2. Traverse Town used to be the FF hub, and now it's sort of spiritually succeeded by the Tooie gang. Man, sure would have been cool to team up with Bee or Neku instead of the Neopet Tamagotchi Build-A-Bear Pokemon. And we've arrived at the end of the video. Just kidding, it's the world in 13th place with 625 votes, the end of the world. Once again, pleasantly surprised by this placement because while I loved End of the World, I feel like it's so easy to forget it existed because it's like the only original location in the game that they've never come back to. In fact, I bet if I allowed write-ins instead of using the drop-down, it would have scored considerably lower because you just might not think to include it as one of your 5. But I'm glad so many of you did, because while it didn't make the cut for my list, I still appreciate the hell out of End of the World. Who exactly is responsible for this? I don't mean in-universe, I'm talking names of Japanese game devs. Like, who do we hold responsible for the World of Chaos? How much of that was Nomura, and how much of it was designed by a gaggle of sleep paralysis demons from hell? While I think I ultimately prefer a world like The World That Never Was, mainly for its story moments, it's hard to be End of the World when it comes to sheer creepy factor. Again, this is fully giving me nightmares as a child. They never reach these heights or depths again until the final world 17 years later. The one thing I wish End of the World would have leaned into more is the idea of it being a sort of galactic junkyard for worlds destroyed by the Heartless. You get a bit of that in the crater rooms after Chernobog with the BBS Princess worlds, and the giant crevasse is kind of like a gummy graveyard, but I wish it went a little bit further. Maybe some more Destiny Islands elements before Homecoming, or stuff from Prankster's Paradise or the Dalmatians world, just to really tie everything together at the end. But it's overall a nitpick, it's still a masterclass in how to end a Kingdom Hearts game. They managed to book Chernobog for this shit, and he's famously a total diva, so they really pulled out all the stopgas. And again, we go back to back on Final Worlds. In 12th place with 641 votes is the KH3 Grand Finale, Scala ad Kylum. Honestly, I love Scala, but I'd be really curious to see how it would have done if we ran this survey before Remind. I liked it a lot at launch, but the Breezy Quarter section in the DLC adds so much character to the world, and by the time I was done exploring it, I just wanted a truly, fully fleshed out Scala of Disney World length. Because I do think that's one of the more glaring flaws of KH3, saying this as someone who loves the game and holds it as only second to KH1, it doesn't have a full original world, which tend to be extremely popular if you've noticed how a bunch of them still haven't shown up on the list. You've got Twilight Town, which was neutered, and the Graveyard, which is 90% boss battles, and then little limited time only areas like the Land of Departure and the Dark World. I think a lot of us wanted something akin to a KH1 Hollow Bastion or KH2 World That Never Was in this game, but most of the original stuff we got was in piecemeal. Remind Scala is the closest we got to that, and again, I'm gonna cut myself off early before I talk too much because I want to truly deep dive on this at a later date. But the place is absolutely stunning, it brought me back to feeling like a kid, and there's just such a feeling of grandiosity to it, like you've stumbled on this ancient civilization. Which you kinda have, but it always bothered me that Daybreak Town precedes Scala and not the other way around. Daybreak Town has a much less intimidating name and vibe, and yet it's the more ancient of the two. I wish Union Cross took place in Scala and then Dark Road and Daybreak Town, but again, I'm nitpicking. And just missing out on the top 10, although it would have made it had I not caught some cheaters, in 11th place with 696 votes, it's Symphony of Sorcery. And yeah, for the record, every world left had at least a handful of occasions where people put the same world twice or all 5 times, and to reiterate my feelings from the character video, this is such goober behavior. You guys know that there's no stakes here, right? I'm saying this as a guy whose job it is to talk about Kingdom Hearts. There are absolutely no stakes to this exercise. It's also really easy to catch. =if, parentheses, count A, parentheses, B2, F2, parentheses, greater than, count unique, parentheses, B2, F2, parentheses, comma, duplicate. Duh. Anyway, I had no doubt that Symphony would be the most popular Dream Drop world, and it also ends up being the most popular world from a non-numbered title, so all we've got left now is KH1, 2, and 3. And believe it or not, Symphony is the most popular world based on a film from the traditional animated Disney canon. There's other Disney worlds still left, but not in that same category. Symphony of Sorcery really is an instant classic. I think even Dreamdrop's most vocal detractors, a group that I am definitely not the chairman and mayor of, even they can admit that this world is pure magic. I thought so in 2012, and I think so now. Also, bear in mind, according to a previous survey video where I polled the audience on which games they've beaten, Dreamdrop had the lowest percentage out of the quote-unquote Big Five, with just under 80% reporting that they had beaten the game. So the fact that Symphony made this deep of a run past a bunch of worlds from games that have much higher percentages is a true testament to the Symphony's power. I think it really just speaks for itself. Like, for me to explain to you why it's cool is probably redundant. But in short, creative and ambitious world choice, beautiful areas, decent level design, extreme off-the-chart levels of charm and novelty, only dragged down whatsoever by the goddamn Spellican. With that, we entered the top 10, although once again, this would have been 9th if not for some sneaky selfies in the audience. Yes, in 10th place with 700 votes is your home and mine, Destiny Islands. And I think that's really what this high placement comes down to. This place is one of those quintessential video game homes. There is another obvious KH1 world that beats it because you just end up spending way more time there, but as a kid, I still spent a ton of time on the islands too. Nowadays, you can breeze through what's really just a tutorial world in a few minutes, but back when you couldn't skip cutscenes and also you were a little baby who was trash at games, this may as well have been your virtual home. I was attached to this place and felt a genuine sense of sadness and longing for it once the game rips it away from you. I think there's something really valuable in that as a storytelling choice. Give us a taste of the routine and familiar and then rip the rug out from under us, shove us through a wormhole into a new world, and say good luck. It's because you can't return that we hold this place in such high regard. I mean, I would start up new save files just to go back and explore, or literally just hang out. I remember seeing a tweet like a year or two ago that talked about how kids just play games differently, how they essentially play games within games. The example in the tweet was this area of Rogueport in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, another favorite game of mine that the writer would pretend was Mario's house. I was 100% doing shit like that on Destiny Islands. I was pretending Sora wasn't trying to leave and was just living his day-to-day life, running races, having sparring matches, going for swims. I was essentially playing a very limited life sim. I know this just speaks to my fondness of the world, but I'm willing to bet some of you who voted for it also had similar experiences. It almost makes me kinda sad that I don't engage with games in that way anymore, because imagination sort of inevitably evolves as we get older, but I think that makes a place like Destiny Islands all the more special. And in 9th place with 702 votes, the most popular Disney world in KH2, Timeless River. Once again, it was never really in doubt. Its closest competition was Halloween Town, and there's an over 300 vote difference there. Timeless River is truly the KH world poster child for size doesn't matter. It's not the size of the Steamboat Willie, it's how you use it. I didn't say anything demonetizable there, for the record. The world is small even by KH2 standards, but it's got charm out the wazoo, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it provides for a break in the pretty early established monotony in going from Disney World to Disney World. It's still a Disney World, obviously, but it has that added spice of Maleficent's involvement and the sheer novelty of time traveling to a world's former incarnation. It's like a little side episode intermission, with a plotline that feels like it has a bit more juice to it than a lot of the worlds on either side of it. Admittedly, as a kid, I didn't love it, but that's because children are born with an inherent bias against black and white cartoons because no color equals boring. And yet, I was also not fond of Space Paranoids, so clearly I was very picky about too much color as well. But the more Werther's originals I eat, the fonder my feelings become toward Timeless River. Which, bad name, right? It's very much of its time. I think I'm mostly just being a pedantic dick about it, but it's arguably the least timeless location in the series. I also don't know what I would call the place, so whatever. I occasionally see people talking about how they want Timeless River to come back, but I don't know, I think leaving it as this one-off oddity is the right move, because what else do you really do here besides visit cartoon vignettes that are less iconic than the one Timeless River already focused on? From one game's most popular Disney world to another, in 8th place with 711 votes is KH1's Halloween Town. For some reason, I'm a bit surprised to see it this high up, but I suppose if you asked me what I thought the most beloved KH1 Disney world was, I'd probably land here by default. I know it's my personal favorite, although still not in my own survey responses because I went basic with this. There's reason to believe the theory that Kingdom Hearts helped spark something of a renaissance for The Nightmare Before Christmas, because it wasn't exactly the same titan of counterculture hot topic energy back then like it is now. Or maybe like it was 10 years ago. I don't think we're in peak Nightmare fandom anymore. I mean, I could be wrong with that assessment, but this was the oddball choice for this game. I didn't really know a ton about it at all going into it. Again, you can chalk some of that up to being 6, but regardless, it wasn't like obviously synonymous with things like Aladdin or The Little Mermaid. All this to say, I'm glad they took a chance on this weirdo world pick, because clearly it ended up being a big fan favorite, and I don't think it's necessarily just because the movie is such a cult classic. If you've heard me talk at all about KH1, you've heard me sing the praises of any and everything involving Oogie Boogie. His scenes, his boss fight, and especially his manner, all peak. I would unironically put just Oogie's Manor above several worlds we've talked about today. Halloween Town also just feels kinda adventurous, not quite to the level of Deep Jungle, but I think because the only consistent save point is at the start of the world in Guillotine Gate, you end up feeling far away from safety as you make your way deeper into the world. Admittedly, Halloween Town does feel a bit backtracky at times, since the world kinda has you just chipping away at the route to the manor before making you go back to the lab. But that structure also allows me to spend more time in this world, so I can't be too mad at it. Moving on to 7th place with 781 votes, we have Toy Box. Part of me is surprised to see it perform this well, but I think Toy Story is just such a juggernaut, this world could have been the size of KH3 Twilight Town and it would have still done numbers. Literally, if the entire world was confined to Andy's room and the street outside, I think it still would have landed in the top 20. And to be honest, that's my favorite part of the world despite the majority of it taking place in Galaxy Toys. Not that the store is bad, I just feel like the sense of scale is really felt in the starting areas, you feel like you're toy-sized. I have trouble envisioning Galaxy Toys as an actual place that full-sized humans would walk around in, and so it ends up feeling like, well, a video game level. Which I get sounds silly to say, that's what it is, but I feel like the big draw and selling point to a Toy Story world is being tiny in this giant world, so you have to really nail the sense of scale all the way through. On the other hand, I can totally concede that making Galaxy Toys look like a more realistic, traditional toy store like Al's Toy Barn from Toy Story 2 would make for a less exciting time. Maybe if we had like an extra neighborhood area on the way to Galaxy Toys or some time in other rooms in Andy's house, I'd be higher on the world overall. But it's still pretty easily a top half KH3 world for me because the sheer catharsis of getting Toy Story and Kingdom Hearts is hard to match. Toy Story is the prince that was promised. We're talking back in KH1 development days, like this was a long time coming. Woody and Buzz are both portrayed so well even without their OG voice actors, the secondary characters are a lot of fun, and the boss battle against Zurg was phenomenal. Don't correct me. Let me have this. I also think Toy Box is ripe for a return visit, and I'm all for it. I don't feel extremely confident that we will or won't get it, but given the franchise's enduring popularity and the sheer bulk of characters and locations KH3 didn't get to touch on, there is an infinite amount of potential. Maybe even beyond infinite. Up next, in 6th place, we finally reach a world that Patty spent a vote on. One of 1,186 votes came from me for KH2 Hollow Bastion, aka Radiant Garden. And we've entered a new tier here because this is by far our largest gap in votes up to this point, so the top 6 is like consensus level stuff. I mean, telling a bunch of Kingdom Hearts fans about the middle part of KH2 is like a seagull telling a bunch of other seagulls about Boardwalk French fries. Like, yeah dude, we know about that, it's our favorite thing. While KH1 remains my favorite overall game, and Radiant Garden isn't even my favorite KH2 world, I don't think there's a stronger sequence in the franchise than everything from leaving Space Paranoids to being bailed out by Maleficent. It's an absolutely insane run, and it's packed with everything that keeps me coming back to these games after all this time. It's a showcase of Disney meeting Final Fantasy, it's absurdity wrapped in sincerity and earnestness, it's a plot twist and an upheaval of what you thought you knew, it seriously has it all. Demyx, Thousand Heartless, the FF Ravine fights, all extremely memorable and just plain hype. That's really all it boils down to. Hype is the basic building block that we're dealing with here. How do you watch Mickey vow that he will have vengeance for his clearly not dead friend, and then not feel like you could punch the fucking moon? You have all these different factions at war with each other, and then Sephiroth just casually drops in to say hi. It's like World War III, Woodstock, and the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade happening all at the same time. I rest my case, your honors. It may just be, as the kids say, peak. Also, Final Mix has Cavern of Remembrance, so it actually has some level design to it as well. We arrive in the top 5, and this is the end of the road for Disney Worlds, or more accurately, the Disney Worlds are running out of sea, because in 5th place with 1,602 votes is the Caribbean, also the most popular KH3 world overall. And we have a just slightly bigger gap between 5th and 6th than 6th and 7th, and the gaps don't get any bigger than this. I'm honestly really happy that both a Disney World and a KH3 world made it into the top 5, even though I didn't vote for the Caribbean. I've been asked a lot what my favorite KH3 world is though, and I change my mind on it a lot, but I think I more often than not tend to land on the Caribbean. I'm not even particularly high on Pirates as a franchise, I mean the first 3 are fine enough movies, but I think KH3 really excelled at making this a super engaging and satisfying place to explore. A huge chunk of this world is completely non-mandatory for your story visit, and I think that's what makes it so fun to sail from island to island. I felt like I was making legitimate discoveries on my own. It was exciting whenever I docked the ship and hit the beach. I love the crabs. I don't have another rant in the chamber, but if you're pissing and moaning about the crabs, we cannot and will not be friends. I do think the only real thing holding this world back is the pretty egregious separation of SDG from anything of importance as far as the world's plot is concerned for like 80% of the visit. They're with the Pirates characters at the beginning and the end, and the rest of the time they're hanging out with Crab Jack. Cutscenes like the real Jack and Cutler Beckett talking on the ship are amongst the least interesting and necessary in the series. But doesn't matter because I have a pirate ship, and more importantly, Sora has a pirate ship. Finally, he's the canon captain of a vessel, and canon goes both ways in this case. Moving on to 4th place, another world I voted for, and spoilers, I voted for everything left, I went true normie mode. With 1,905 votes, it's KH2's The World That Never Was. Back when I ranked the KH2 worlds, I had World That Never Was in 2nd place. I think I'd probably swap it with Radiant Garden to be 3rd nowadays, but it's still incredibly strong in my book. Once again, it's an extremely linear world, and while I don't mean to conflate linearity with a lack of quality, I do tend to enjoy some more open-ended stuff in my game environments. But this is another case of the world's layout working well with the story being told here. I just love the vibe of entering the world at the ground floor, not even in the castle but on the city outskirts, and working your way through enemy territory, climbing the fortress on a quest to kill the big bad. And it's just pure comeuppance for these dickheads who have been misnaming you and dropping mumbo-jumbo on your head for the last 30 hours. I feel like this bloodthirsty killer. I'm literally the meme of the Grim Reaper going to each organization member's bedroom door so I can deliver them their severance package. There's a universe where this world takes on a more KH1-like approach and you have to like solve puzzles to access different rooms and jump around on stuff, and that's probably a fine or even great hypothetical version of it, but there's something really satisfying about being this total wrecking ball, mowing down anything that's trying to stop your ascent to the top. The boss fights are excellent, the story moments are cathartic and occasionally heart-wrenching, looking at you Roxas scenes, and I think to this day it might be my favorite finale sequence in the Kingdom Hearts game. And here we are, the top 3, all of which I knew would be in the top 3, it's the order that's our real question today. If I were to personally rank every world, this would probably be my overall number 2, but I'm still proud and happy to see it make it to this spot. With 1,969 votes, it's KH1 Traverse Town. Please, please, oh fucking please, let the afterlife be KH1 Traverse Town. No more phone, no more discourse, just Victorian cafes and Moogle pom-poms. I would start a family today if I could get a guarantee that my child would be born and raised in Traverse Town, assuming the heart-stealing hellspawn aren't an issue. And even then, fuck it, just stay in the 1st district. It's hard to conceive of a cozier place than Traverse Town. I think its only true competition in that respect is one of 2 worlds still left. The world is, put simply, beautiful, in execution, in concept, in how it serves the story and paints the picture of how the universe of Kingdom Hearts operates. The contrast of going from your bright and sunny island to this perpetually nighttime town, I think, plays a huge part in why KH1 feels so immediately mysterious and somewhat dangerous. Because while this place is cozy, especially the 1st district and the buildings within it, the rest of the town is a free-for-all, overrun with the monsters that just stole your home from you. You're in a safe haven surrounded by the unknown. The strangers you just met who live here are just as wigged out about the shit going on in the outskirts as you are. That's compelling, it's spooky, it's engaging, and I just fucking love it. Again, just conceptually, the idea of a world that forms as a response to the needs of intergalactic refugees displaced by their home planet's apocalypses is something beyond rad as hell. And to this day, nothing has come close to that home base quality that Traverse Town has going for it because, frankly, I don't think any other game has even attempted it. Alright, the title match of the video has arrived. Unlike the character video where 3rd and 2nd were super close but eclipsed by 1st, in this case, 3rd is pretty far away from a really tight race between 1st and 2nd. But just like last time, had I closed the survey even a few moments earlier or later, we could be looking at different final results. So you can consider the top 2 functionally tied, and let me say, the results would have been swapped had I not weeded out duplicate responses. But in 2nd place, with 2,104 votes, is KH2 Twilight Town. So I had a feeling Traverse Town wouldn't be the top spot, and I also felt fairly confident that Twilight Town was the number 1 pick to win. After all, and spoilers for the character video if you care, this is the, at least initially presumed, hometown of Roxas, and he was the most popular character. And again, for all intents and purposes, Twilight Town is the most popular world, because 1st place only beat it by 3 votes. I think it's something of a Cinderella story here for Twilight Town, and clearly not in the Castle of Dreams way, because that place got 59th. But back in the day, one of the most maligned parts of KH2 was the prologue. I mean, some people are still not the biggest fans of it. Too long, too boring, and for the folks who were especially media illiterate, not even important to the story. Who cares about this Roxas guy? The 2000s were something of a base existence. Sometimes pleasant, but often base. Now, granted, I don't think people necessarily dislike Twilight Town as an environment, but I know people were absolutely the opposite of enthralled by 90% of the story content taking place within it. That feeling mostly applied to the casual fans, but again, it was 2005 and 6, and this was the 3rd game. You could only be so brain-rotted by that point. I was 100% reading message boards back then, and it was like a given that Twilight Town was the most boring part of the game, that it was a roadblock keeping you from the stuff of substance. Which, God. All this to say, I'm glad that those early, prehistoric feelings didn't hold the world back in this exercise or general fan consensus nowadays. It is, like Traverse Town, visually gorgeous, probably even more so than its predecessor. I'm not swooning as much at the mere idea or concept of Twilight Town, but it's kind of like a slice of normal in an increasingly zany and hectic, expanding KH universe. It's ultimately my personal favorite KH2 world, not even just for its visuals and frankly excellent story content, but it's even got some of the more interesting and interconnected environments in its game. But I've got one true crown jewel, the Royal Crown, if you will. And that's our first place world with 2,107 votes, KH1 Hollow Bastion. I mean, guys, it's in Super Goddamn Smash Bros. If that's not a ringing endorsement, I don't know what is. How do you argue with that? It's like if God came down and said, hey, I know there's been some confusion, but smooth peanut butter is better than chunky. What, you're gonna argue with God? In this case, Sakurai? Being inducted into the Video Game Hall of Fame aside, if you can even put that aside, Hollow Bastion is the fucking GOAT. My life was irrevocably changed when those stupid yellow shoes touched down in Rising Falls. To quote the late Oliver Swanek, smell that air. Couldn't you just drink it like booze? I just love being here, existing in this space. I don't think I'd want to live in Hollow Bastion because I'd probably trip off the Castle Gates area and break my neck like a week after moving in, but I would take a day trip there. I want to curl up in the library and read some Kingdom Hearts nonsense literature. Let me sit in the Kyrie's grandma chair, crack open Half-It Volume 4, and drift away into the best nap of my fucking life. I could have seen Hollow Bastion scoring third out of the top 3 because, again, I feel like there's still some stank on it for being just ever so slightly tricky to navigate at times. Don't get me wrong, I got a little lost in the waterway and lift stops too as a kid, but that shit builds character. And speaking of building character, being abandoned by Donald and Goofy is devastating. I mean, the moment is etched onto my psyche. They used me for Mickey locating. That wasn't nice. But it paved the way for, you know, the scene in the series, the one I would argue is at the core of everything, My Friends Are My Power. And to harken back, or forward, to Hollow Bastion's appearance in Recoded, this mantra gets to be exemplified in the gameplay leading up to the moment too, because the artist soon to be known as Prince Adam is all you've got, the only defense between you and some rabid Dark Balls and defenders. The fact that I've spoken nearly 400 words about KH1 Hollow Bastion and have yet to bring up the fact that Sora stabs himself with a Keyblade is a testament to what this world has going for it. This isn't just where Sora's chest cavity opens up, it's where the universe of Kingdom Hearts opens up. This is the birth of Roxas and Naminé, the start of Sora and Kairi trading back and forth on who saves who, Riku narrowly escaping his moral event horizon and starting a multi-game arc of redemption. It's all happening in Hollow Bastion's hottest club, the Grand Hall. It's all just so good, man. Every ingredient came together in the perfect amount to make this cake. Plot developments, character growth, villain twist, platforming, puzzle solving, memorable boss fights, on point as ever music. It just doesn't get any better than this. The worst thing about Hollow Bastion is that I don't think they can ever reach these heights again. Plus, did you know that you can freeze the bubble? It's true. You can do that. Before I ramble a bit here, I just want to say if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like. God, it hurts to say. And also, if you could subscribe to get, you know, it'll show up on your page if there's more things from me. And if you really like it, please consider checking out patreon.com/regularpat. That is a huge thing that helps me do this. Can you tell I'm rusty from not doing these outros for a while? If you want to get some additional stats or you just want to see all the worlds kind of written out in the Google Sheet, that will be linked in the description. I have them broken down by game, I just have a sheet for just original worlds, just for Disney worlds. I consolidated all the results, so if you just want to see like, hey, if we took every version of Halloween Town or every version of Hollow Bastion and put all the votes together, where they stack up, we have a list for that as well. So I think it's pretty cool. I really just want to say that I'm so grateful and lucky to have the people who not just watched this video, but also filled out the survey. I was like so taken aback by how nice people were in the field that I gave, little optional thing after the 5 drop downs to let them, you know, give them a chance to say anything else that they wanted to let me know about their choices. And I was like, wow, people were not this nice to me when I did the character video, and that's because there wasn't a field to say things to me. It was just you had you had the write-ins, but I didn't ask like, hey, any other things you want to tell me? So just thank you to the people that left really nice messages. That just super motivates me to keep doing what I do here. I'm still having so much fun doing it, and it's really in large part thanks to folks like you. So thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy.